When Mara Harrow found the stranger in the whiteout, he asked for warm water for his German shepherd before he asked for anything for himself. He said he had no truck, no money, and nowhere safe to go. She married him for one extra pair of hands. Only after the snow began testing every wall did she learn what those hands had once been trained to do. Heavy snow had been falling outside Bozeman since before dawn. Not in pretty Christmas flakes, not in the soft manner of postcards, but in thick, gray curtains that erased fence posts, wagon ruts, tire tracks, and the difference between a road and a ditch. By late afternoon, the Harrow farm looked as if the world had pulled a wool blanket over it and forgotten the people underneath. Mara Harrow stood at the kitchen door with her father's old wool coat buttoned crooked over her brown dress, one hand wrapped around a lantern that was not yet lit, listening to the storm press its weight against the log house. Her mother coughed once behind her. Not hard, not the kind of cough that sent Mara running anymore, but enough to make Mara's shoulders climb toward her ears. Ada Harrow had been stronger once. She had carried buckets from the pump, laughed at bad coffee, and told Elias Harrow that no Montana winter had been made yet that could frighten a woman who had buried 3 sisters, raised 1 daughter, and learned to bake bread in a stove that lied about its own temperature. That had been before the last winter took the breath out of her chest and forgot to give it back. Now Ada sat near the stove with a quilt over her knees, mending a sleeve by the light from the window, and pretending not to watch Mara pretend she was not worried. Mara knew all the forms of pretending in that house. There was the ledger pretending to be ordinary paper while it carried her father's remaining debt. There was the barn pretending to be sound because it had not fallen yet. There was the woodpile pretending to be enough. There was Mara herself, 28 years old, lean from labor, stubborn from grief, who could split a round of pine and carry 2 buckets in one trip and still feel in the small hours like a girl listening for boots that would never cross the floor again. The cow was what pulled her outside. One of the red heifers, foolish in the mildest weather and inspired toward disaster in the worst, had slipped through a sagging section near the north field. Mara had seen the broken rail that morning and told herself she would fix it after checking the pump, after boiling potatoes, after helping Ada wash, after moving hay closer to the barn door, after everything else that had learned to stand in line behind everything else. Now the heifer was missing, and the sky was lowering fast. Mara took the lantern, a coil of rope, and Elias's old cap, because it made no sense to miss a man and waste his hat at the same time. "You wait till it eases," Ada said. "It won't ease before dark." "Then you wait till morning." Mara looked back. Her mother's hair, once black, was braided in silver and pinned with the same 2 pins she had worn for as long as Mara could remember. Her hands were still clever. That was some mercy. They could mend, they could fold, they could hold a cup. They could not carry water anymore. "If she gets into the creek bottom, she'll freeze by morning." Ada opened her mouth, shut it, and looked toward the stove. Mothers had many ways of saying prayer without making a daughter feel trapped inside one. "Take the long rope. I have it. And the whistle." Mara lifted the small tin whistle from her pocket. Elias had used it for cattle dogs and once, according to family legend, for calling Ada back from a church picnic when a preacher from Helena had been talking too long. Ada gave a thin smile. "Your father said that thing could wake the righteous and disappoint the dead. Then I had better use it politely." The joke was small. It did its work. Mara stepped out and pulled the door shut against the snow. Cold took the shape of teeth. It bit the space between her glove and sleeve, found the wet crack in one boot, and slid beneath the wool at her neck. The yard had lost its familiar edges. The pump was a dark lump. The barn, only 30 yards away, had become a shadow with a roof. Every sound was dampened except the wind, and even that seemed less like noise than pressure, a great unseen hand leaning against Montana. Mara lowered her head and walked by memory. 7 steps from the porch to the chopping block, 11 more to the first gate. Keep the barn on the left shoulder, do not trust the open white. She had learned that from Elias. Snow made liars of distance and good sense. The north field appeared only when she nearly struck the fence with her knee. She found the broken rail by touch, cursed under her breath, and saw the heifer's tracks already softening under fresh powder. They led toward the wagon road. Of course they did. A sensible cow would have stayed near hay and shelter. A Harrow cow apparently wished to inspect the county. Mara followed Rope over one-arm lantern banging against her thigh. The snow deepened beyond the field. Twice she sank to the knee. Once she stopped to breathe and heard nothing but the hiss of snow against dry grass. Then the tracks vanished. Not faded. Vanished beneath a wind-blown sheet that had crossed the road like spilled flour. Mara stood still. That was when she saw the dog. At first it was only a dark break in the white, too still for brush, too shaped for a stump. Then it moved. A German shepherd stood in the road ahead, broad-chested, sable coat dusted pale black, saddle dark beneath the snow. One ear tall, and the other nicked in a way that made him look permanently skeptical. He faced Mara as if he had been waiting for her, not threatening, not begging, simply blocking the road, with the complete confidence of an animal accustomed to being obeyed. Mara tightened her grip on the rope. "Go home," she called. The dog did not move. "That is excellent advice for both of us." Still nothing. The dog looked over his shoulder, then back at her. He did not bark, he did not wag. He merely told her in the silent language of dogs who consider humans slow but salvageable that the important thing was behind him. Mara's mouth went dry. She had lived long enough on a farm to trust animals when they refused a path. She stepped closer. The gold lowered his head, turned and took 3 careful steps into the snow, then stopped to make sure she followed. "I am not in the habit of taking orders from strange dogs," Mara said. The dog looked back again. There was no humor in him. There was, however, judgment. "Fine," she followed. 20 yards beyond the road bend, near a run of cottonwoods, the ditch dropped sharply. A dark truck lay at an angle below it, half buried, one wheel still turning slowly in the wind, as if remembering motion. Not a wagon, not one of the old farm rigs from the valley, but a motor truck with a cracked windshield and a load of supplies scattered under fresh snow. A man sat against a broken fence post above the ditch, one knee drawn up, one arm held close beneath a torn navy parka. His face was pale beneath a short brown beard. Snow had gathered on his shoulders. He had the look of someone who had arranged himself carefully so as not to alarm the woman who might find him, which alarmed Mara more than if he had shouted. His eyes lifted to hers. Pale blue alert, too steady for a man who should have been near panic. "Ma'am," he said. His voice was rough but controlled. The dog stepped to his side and pressed his shoulder against the man's leg. Mara stopped 5 paces away. "Are you alone?" "Yes." "Is anyone else in that truck?" "No." He answered too quickly, then seemed to understand why she had asked. "No one else. I was hauling supplies. Took the bend too wide after the road disappeared." Mara looked at the ditch. She could see enough to know the truck would not be moving soon. "Can you stand?" "I can if I need to." "That is not what I asked." For the first time, something like a smile touched his mouth and disappeared before it became useful. "Not well." The dog gave a low sound, not a growl exactly, more like a complaint directed at pride itself. Mara almost laughed. She did not. "Your dog has more sense than you." "Often." "What is his name?" "Atlas." The dog looked at her when he heard it, then returned his attention to the man. Mara tucked the lantern under one arm and crouched near the stranger, keeping room between them. "And yours?" The pause was small, but it was there. "Cole Mercer." Mara Harrow. My farm is back that way. She nodded into the storm. I was looking for a cow, not a man. Sorry to disappoint. You have not met the cow. This time his smile stayed a moment. The wind pushed snow between them. Mara saw the bloodless pinch around his mouth, the care with which he held one hand, the way his gaze moved from her face to the tree line, to the slope above the road, counting hazards. Working man, maybe. Soldier, maybe. Drifter, no. His boots were built for cold weather, expensive once, well used now. A fixed-blade knife sat at his belt, but his hands remained where she could see them. That mattered. I have water at the house, Mara said. Can your dog walk? He can walk. Cole looked at Atlas. The dog's injured foreleg was not obvious until he shifted weight. Warm water for him if you haven't. He has been eating snow. That was the first thing he asked for. Not a bed, not food, not help with the truck. Warm water for the dog. Mara felt something inside her, something tired and suspicious loosened by one thread. And you, water is enough. Men say that when bread is required. I won't argue with bread. Good, because I have no energy left for arguing with half-frozen strangers. She unwound the rope. He looked at it. You came prepared. For a cow. Still prepared. The compliment landed oddly because it sounded like an assessment, not flattery. Mara moved closer, braced herself, and offered the rope for support. Cole hesitated before taking it, as if accepting help cost him something he had been trying to spend slowly. When he stood, the world narrowed to effort. He did not groan, but Atlas pressed close, and Mara saw his jaw lock. No graphic evidence was needed. Pain had its own manners. They climbed from the ditch by inches. Twice Cole tried to shift weight away from Mara. Twice she snapped at him. If you fall, I am not dragging you by your ears. Understood. I mean it. I believed you the first time. Atlas moved ahead, then back, then ahead again, checking their pace. The dog seemed to know exactly how far humans could be trusted before supervision became necessary. By the time they reached the Harrow yard, dusk had begun to thicken inside the snowfall. Ada opened the kitchen door before Mara could knock snow from her boots. The older woman's eyes went from Mara to Cole to Atlas and did not widen. Ada Harrow had survived enough surprises to consider most of them late. I found something besides the cow, Mara said. So I see. Cole dipped his head with effort. Ma'am? Atlas stood at attention beside him, wet, watchful, dignified beyond reason. Ada looked at the dog. That one comes in first. Cole blinked. Mara stared. Mother? He is limping, and he has better manners than most men who have crossed this porch. Atlas, hearing justice spoken, stepped inside. Cole did not. He stood at the threshold with snow melting down his parka. The barn is enough. You are hurt, Ada said. The barn is still enough. Mara understood something then. He would accept shelter but not presume closeness. He would take help if given, but he would leave the choosing to them. That was either respect or careful practice, maybe both. She pointed toward the barn. One night. There is hay, a lantern, and 2 old horse blankets. I will bring water and bread. Thank you. Do not make me regret it. Atlas looked up at Cole as if this condition were reasonable. Cole gave a faint nod. I will do my best. Mara got him settled in the barn with more trouble than either of them admitted. The red heifer trader and philosopher was found standing inside the open lean-to as if she had never considered any other plan. Mara shut the gate and called her several names unfit for church. Cole heard one and looked away with the strange solemnity of a man refusing to laugh because laughing might hurt. She brought a pail of warm water for Atlas, a tin cup for Cole, a plate of bread beans and cold venison, and Elias's spare blanket. Cole looked at the blanket longer than he looked at the food. I can use the horse blanket. That one smells like horse and mouse. This one smells like cedar. Choose wisely. He accepted it. His uninjured hand brushed the worn edge, and for a second his face changed, not with greed or relief, but with the quiet shame of receiving something that had belonged to a household before he did. Mara pretended not to see. That was one kindness she could manage. Back in the kitchen, Ada had set 2 bowls on the table and 1 shallow pan near the stove for Atlas. "You are not keeping the dog in here," Mara said. "I am keeping the floor warm beneath his feet until his coat dries." "That is a long sentence for yes." Ada took up her mending. "Your father used to say a good dog at the door is cheaper than a lock. Father also said our north fence would last another 10 years. He was an optimist in lumber and a pessimist in people." Mara sat exhausted down to the bone. Through the wall she could hear the storm gathering itself. Snow brushed the windows. Somewhere in the barn, Atlas gave one sharp bark, not fear, warning. Mara was on her feet before the chair stopped rocking. Cole shouted something she could not hear. She grabbed the lantern and ran into the yard. The barn roof was a dark slope under a white burden, and as the wind shifted, a heavy slab of snow slid from the upper drift and slammed against the weaker rear pitch. Wood groaned long and low. Atlas stood in the barn doorway, barking now, his body angled not toward escape but toward the cattle stalls. Cole, pale and barely steady, had already dragged a rake and ladder from the wall. Mara lifted the lantern. The roof groaned again. Above them, winter had put its hand on the barn and begun to press. Morning did not arrive so much as thin the darkness until the snow outside the barn became visible in layers, blue near the ground, gray beyond the yard, white, where the wind tore loose powder from the roof and flung it sideways. Harrow had slept perhaps an hour in a chair beside the kitchen stove, boots still on, coat still buttoned, hair smelling of cold smoke and damp wool. When she woke, her neck ached, and her fingers were curled around the tin whistle as if the night had tried to steal even that. Ada was asleep under 2 quilts, lips parted, breathing shallow but steady. Atlas lay on the braided rug near the stove with his sable coat nearly dry, head between his paws, one amber eye open and fixed on the kitchen door. He had not truly slept either. That made 3 of them. The stranger in the barn had worked past midnight with one useful hand, a bad shoulder, and the maddening calm of a man who had learned somewhere that panic was a luxury to be rationed. Together, he and Mara had pulled the cattle from the stalls beneath the strange section, propped a temporary brace under the rear pitch, and pushed enough snow from the lower roof to stop the worst of the groaning. They had not fixed the barn. They had only persuaded it to wait. Mara remembered the final moments before she returned to the house, Cole standing in the lantern glow, breathing hard, looking up at the rafters as if listening to a language no one else could hear. Atlas had leaned against his leg. Cole had set one hand on the dog's head, not petting, not exactly, just anchoring himself to the warm fact of him. "You should sleep," Mara had said. "So should the roof," Cole answered. She had been too tired not to smile. Now daylight had come, and daylight had a cruel habit of showing accounts due. Mara rose carefully. Atlas's head came up. "You stay," she whispered. He stood. That was not an invitation. He picked up one paw, lowered it, and continued looking at her. Ada stirred in the chair. "Do not quarrel with a military dog before breakfast, Mara. He has more training." "Whose side are you on?" "The side least likely to track snow across my clean floor, which at the moment is no one." Mara opened the door. Cold moved in like an animal. Atlas slipped past her before she could stop him, paused on the porch until she joined him, then trotted toward the barn with a slight unevenness in his foreleg. The yard was changed. Snow had banked against the north wall of the house nearly to the lower window ledge. The pump handle wore a sleeve of ice. The path to the barn was gone except for the trough of footprints from the night before, already softening. Smoke lifted from the chimney, then bent down sharply behind the roof ridge in a way Mara did not like. She noticed it because she had seen Cole notice the chimney yesterday. Already the stranger's attention had infected her. That annoyed her more than the cold. Cole was not in the hay where she had left him. For one sharp second, Mara thought he had gone, taken food and blanket, and vanished into the storm with whatever story he had not told. Then she heard scraping above. She stepped back and saw him on the low barn roof, tied off with a rope around his waist, pushing snow down with a wide board. His parka sleeve was stiff with frozen melt. His face looked worse in daylight, not because of any dramatic wound, but because exhaustion had hollowed him around the eyes. He moved carefully. 3 pushes, pause, 3 pushes, listen. Atlas stood below and stared up with the displeasure of a supervisor whose employee had ignored medical advice. "Get down!" Mara called. Cole looked over the roof edge. "Good morning." "It is not. Get down. If I leave the load on this side until afternoon, that cracked rafter will not enjoy it. The rafter can file a complaint after breakfast. It may not wait that long. You may not either." He considered this. Snow slid from the board and struck the ground between them with a soft, heavy thud. "I am almost finished." "Every fool on a roof says that." "Do you know many fools on roofs?" "I knew my father." That made him pause. Something respectful passed through his face. He pushed the last section clear, then climbed down slower than pride wanted. Mara pretended not to see how tightly he gripped the ladder. Atlas did not pretend. The dog pressed against his knee at the bottom and huffed one sharp breath that sounded like scolding. "I know," Cole murmured. "He knows," Mara said. "That makes one of you." He accepted the insult with a faint bow of the head. "Fair." In the barn, the cattle stamped and breathed steam into the dim air. The temporary brace had held. Cole had also moved the hay away from a damp corner, set the lantern on a nail instead of the floor, and tied a strip of cloth near a broken board where wind entered. Mara saw all of it. She did not thank him at once. Gratitude was dangerous when a person had not yet decided how long he intended to stay. Instead, she said, "You were given 1 night." "I was." "Roads buried." "It is." "Your truck will not move." "No." "You are answering like a schoolboy who has decided confession is shorter than argument." This thing he did smile, and the smile was tired enough to seem honest. "I have been told that." Mara set her hands on her hips and looked at the roof brace. It was ugly improvised and exactly where it needed to be. "Can you repair a pump?" "Maybe." "Can you split wood?" "Yes." "Can you reset a fence rail in frozen ground?" "With enough time." "Can you do all that without bleeding on my mother's floor, frightening my cattle, or making that dog sad?" Cole looked down at Atlas. "The last one may be difficult. He has high standards." The dog sneezed. Mara felt laughter climb into her chest and refused it entrance. "Work for meals, sleep in the barn until the road clears. No drinking, no trouble, no wandering through the house unless invited. If you steal from us, I will find a way to make you regret choosing a farm owned by a woman with an axe and unpaid bills." Cole's expression did not change at the threat, but it softened at the bills. That was interesting. "Agreed. And your dog comes in at night if my mother says so, because arguing with her is a waste of winter. He will appreciate that. I was speaking to him." Atlas wagged once, a small thing, almost accidental. Mara turned before the warmth of it could be seen. By breakfast, Cole had washed at the pump despite the ice bandaged his hand more neatly and carried in an armload of wood, though Mara had not asked. Ada studied him over her coffee. Her eyes were not unkind, but they were old enough to know kindness was not the same as trust. "Where did you learn to move snow from a roof like that?" she asked. Cole broke bread in half. "Cold places. Montana is a cold place. Some are less forgiving." Mara looked up. The answer had a locked door inside it. Ada heard it too. She dipped bread into broth and changed direction. Atlas likes oatmeal. Atlas likes anything that is not his prescribed food and therefore morally forbidden. He may have a spoonful. Then he will believe he has negotiated a treaty. Ada placed a spoonful of oatmeal in a saucer. Atlas, who had been lying with professional dignity, approached with reverence. Mara watched Cole watch the dog, and in that small exchange she saw something no lie could easily counterfeit. Affection, worn down by years until it fit the hand. A man could pretend to be poor. He could pretend to be useful. He could not easily pretend the particular worry with which you watched an old injury in a dog's step. Over the next 2 days, the farm began to change in ways so small Mara noticed them only after they saved time. Cole replaced the cracked leather strap on the hand pump with a strip cut from his own gear. Not pretty, but strong. He reset the broken fence rail by driving a wedge into frozen soil and bracing it until spring could give them a better answer. He sharpened Elias's axe with slow strokes, testing the edge on a sliver of pine, then returned it to the exact hook where Mara kept it. He did not ask about the ledger on the shelf, though, once she found his eyes on it. He looked away before she could accuse him of pity. That was wise. Pity was a thing Mara had no cupboard space for. On the third afternoon, Harriet Loomis came by with a basket of turnips and news folded inside her mouth like a church bulletin. Harriet was a widow from across the creek, angular, energetic, and capable of making concern sound like accusation even when she meant well. Her nephew Noah rode behind her on a bay horse, cheeks red scarf half loose, trying to look older than 17 and succeeding only in looking cold. "Mara," Harriet called from the yard. "I heard your heifer made a pilgrimage." She returned without enlightenment. Harriet's eyes moved past her to the barn where Cole was kneeling beside a broken hay rack while Atlas held a strip of leather in his mouth. The dog looked solemnly employed. Cole did not look up at once. He finished setting one peg, then stood. Snow dusted his shoulders. "Ma'am," he said. Harriet's eyebrows rose. In a valley where every family name had roots, or at least rumors, a man with no history stood out more than smoke on a clear day. "I did not know you had hired help." "I did not know I could afford any," Mara said. "Turns out hunger is cheaper than wages." Harriet did not smile. Noah did, then corrected his face when his aunt glanced at him. "Roads are bad," Harriet said. "A man could be stranded a while." He could. People talk, people breathe too. I cannot stop either. Harriet's mouth tightened. Not with malice, but with worry. Made bossy by habit. "You are alone here with your mother, I am aware, and a stranger." "He is in the barn. Strangers have crossed barn floors before." Cole's hands stilled at his sides. Atlas, perhaps reading the change, stepped closer to him. Mara felt heat rise under her collar. She had been tired for so long that anger came easy like a bucket from a shallow well. "Harriet, if you brought turnips, I am grateful. If you brought a sermon, Reverend Wells has a warmer coat." Noah looked at the ground. Harriet exhaled, and for a moment her face showed the loneliness under her sharpness. "I brought turnips," she said, "and salve for Ada." The storm in Mara eased by an inch. "Then come in." Harriet did, but not before taking another look at Cole Atlas, the repaired hay rack, and the line of cleared snow along the barn wall. The valley was small. Questions would travel tonight. Mara could almost hear them harnessing their horses. Reverend Wells arrived the next day just as Cole was cutting a narrow trench from the pump to the drainage slope so spilled water would not freeze into a dangerous sheet beside the path. The Reverend had kind eyes, a red nose, and the unfortunate ability to make a pause feel official. He accepted coffee from Ada, asked after her chest, admired the fire, and then cleared his throat in the way men did when preparing to step on a woman's patience with polished shoes. "Mara," he said, "no one doubts your character. That is usually what people say before doubting it. Ada hid a smile in her cup. Reverend Wells looked pained. You know how people can be. Yes, cowardly in groups. Concern is not always cowardice, no, but it often borrows the same coat. The Reverend sighed. A young widow or unmarried woman living with an unrelated man, even in separate quarters, invites talk. I say this not to wound you, but to protect you. Mara stood by the stove. Outside the window, Cole was showing Noah how to wrap rope so it would not tangle when wet. Atlas sat between them, ears lifted, apparently judging the boy's technique. The sight was ordinary, useful, safe in a way that made Mara unexpectedly angry because safety should not have needed defending from gossip. I did not invite the storm, she said. I did not invite the truck into the ditch. I did not invite winter to count how many hands live in this house. Reverend Wells lowered his voice. Winter is not the only thing that can damage a woman's standing. That evening, after Harriet and the Reverend had gone, and Ada had fallen asleep early, Mara found Cole stacking wood under the lean-to. Snow had stopped for the moment, leaving the world blue and hard. Atlas lay nearby, chewing a stick with the focus of a lawyer reviewing a contract. Cole looked up as Mara approached. I can leave when the county plow reaches the road. And go where? Town. Find work, make calls. With what truck? He looked toward the buried ditch. That complicates it. Do you have money for lodging? Not on me. Common nearby? No. Each answer came clean, but Mara sensed the edges being trimmed. She stepped closer. I need to say something plainly. All right. I do not need rescuing. I did not think you did. I am not looking for romance. His face remained still, though a faint color rose at his neck. Understood. I cannot pay a hired man through winter. I can barely feed one if he eats like a reasonable person and not like my father's cousin from Idaho. I can be reasonable. What I need is another pair of hands, hands that will still be here when the pump freezes, the barn roof complains, my mother coughs, or the cattle choose stupidity as a family value. Atlas stopped chewing and looked toward the barn, as if the cattle had indeed insulted the household. Cole set down the wood slowly. Mara. It was the first time he had used her name without Miss before it. The sound made something in the cold yard shift. I have no vehicle that runs no cash worth naming, no home in this valley, and nothing useful to offer a marriage except work and a dog who outranks me. That dog may be your strongest argument. He usually is. I am serious. So am I. He looked at his bandaged hand, then at the house where Ada slept near the stove. A marriage made for winter is still a marriage. People can get hurt inside practical arrangements. People are already getting hurt outside them. The words came sharper than she intended. She drew breath, saw it smoke between them, and made herself continue. The Reverend was here. Harriet is worried. The valley will talk until it makes a story it likes better than the truth. I cannot waste strength fighting every mouth from here to town. If you stay as my husband, the talk changes shape. If you work, we may all see spring. That is the bargain. Cole was quiet a long time. The snow on the lean-to roof slid in a soft whisper. You should ask me again in the morning, he said. Why? Because daylight is kinder to hard choices than exhaustion. That answer disarmed her. Not because it was clever, because it was careful of her. Mara pulled her coat tighter. Fine. Morning. She turned toward the house. Behind her, Atlas gave one low woof, as if recording the agreement. Before dawn, Mara woke to the sound of ice cracking in the pump handle, and Cole already outside dealing with it. She watched from the window while he poured warm water over the joint, worked the handle gently, and shielded the metal with his own body from the wind. Atlas sat beside him, tail around his paws. Ada came to stand near Mara, quilt over her shoulders. You are thinking loudly, Ada said. I am thinking practically. That is what Harrow women call fear when they put boots on it. Mara did not answer. The pump began to move. Water splashed into the bucket. Cole lifted both buckets before Ada could even reach for her shawl. He saw Mara watching and did not smile, did not boast, did not make the work a performance. He simply carried the water to the porch, set it down, and stepped back. Mara opened the door. My answer has not changed. Cole's eyes searched her face, perhaps for uncertainty, perhaps for mercy. Mine has not either. Atlas leaned against his leg. Ada from behind Mara said, Then someone had better tell Reverend Wells before Harriet Loomis hears it from the cow. And despite the cold, despite the debt, despite the unease coiled under her ribs, Mara laughed. It surprised all of them. Even Atlas tilted his head. The wedding took place 3 days later in the small church east of town, while snow fell thick enough to soften the sound of the bell. There were no flowers, no supper. Mara wore the brown dress she already owned, brushed clean and mended at one cuff. Cole wore a white shirt borrowed from a cedar chest and his dark parka over it because the church stove had opinions about warmth that did not align with scripture. Atlas lay at the back beside Noah, who had been told twice not to feed him biscuit, and obeyed once. Ada stood beside Mara, a little breathless, eyes bright. Harriet served as witness with the expression of a woman who had worried a thing into happening and now intended to supervise the consequences. Reverend Wells spoke the vows gently. Cole's voice did not shake. Mara's did, only once. When the Reverend asked for the ring, Cole produced a plain silver band from his pocket. Mara stared. It was my mother's, he said quietly. If you do not want to wear it, I understand. It was the first true piece of a past he had offered her, and it landed in her palm with more weight than metal should have. She put it on. Not because she loved him. Not yet. Because winter had forced many choices on her, and this one at least she would make standing straight. By afternoon, they were back at the farm. Marriage changed less than gossip would have liked. Cole carried his small duffel from the barn to the kitchen door and stopped there, waiting. Mara looked at him, then at the narrow stair toward her room, then at Ada, pretending to arrange spoons without listening. You can sleep in the front room by the stove until we decide otherwise. Cole nodded once. No offense, no claim, only relief so carefully hidden it almost vanished. Atlas walked past them all, circled the rug twice, and lay down as if the household had finally completed paperwork he had approved days ago. That night, after Ada slept and the stove settled into Cole's, Mara found Cole standing near the north window, not looking out exactly, but listening. What is it? She asked. Wind shifted. You can hear that through logs? I can hear what the stove is doing. She joined him. Smoke moved oddly outside, flattening near the roof before lifting. Is it bad? Not tonight. That is not comforting. It is honest. The answer annoyed her because it was the kind she had requested. She looked at his profile in the low light, the scar near his brow, the tired set of his shoulders, the dog sleeping with one ear aimed toward him. Husband, the law said. Stranger, the heart answered. Outside, snow gathered along the north wall in a deepening drift. Inside, Mara touched the silver ring with her thumb and wondered what sort of man had nothing but work to offer and still carried his mother's ring in a pocket through a blizzard. Before she could ask, a long wooden groan came from the house itself, not the barn this time, but above the kitchen ceiling. Cole's head lifted. Atlas was already on his feet. Mara looked toward the dark rafters, and the new shape of her marriage stood beside her, silent, listening, while winter began its next question. Snow fell all through the first week of their marriage, steady enough to hide the mountain line, and quiet enough to make every small sound inside the Harrow house seem important, the spoon against Ada's cup, the stove lid shifting, Atlas's nails tapping the floor when he rose to follow Cole. the small scrape of Mara's ring whenever her hand moved across the table. Morning came late and blue. Evening came early and without apology. Between them, work filled every hour so completely that marriage had little room to become anything except another chore carefully set beside the others. Cole slept in the front room on a narrow cot he built from old boards and canvas, his boots placed heel to wall, his parka folded within reach. His knife belt hung high where no one would step on it, but near enough that his hand could find it in the dark. Mara noticed these things because the house had been hers and Ada's for 14 months, and new habits rang like dropped pans. Cole never opened a cupboard without asking. He never took the last biscuit. He never entered Mara's room, not even to repair the window latch after she mentioned the draft. Instead, he set the toolkit at the top stair and said, "If you want me to fix it, leave the door open." She did. He fixed it while she stood in the hall with arms folded, and when he finished, he stepped back as though the threshold had a fence line drawn across it. That restraint should have made her comfortable. Some days it did. Other days it irritated her, though she could not have said why. Perhaps because gratitude was easier when a man made mistakes she could scold. Cole made mistakes, but not the obvious kind. He left his coffee untouched until it went cold because he was watching snow move past the window. He forgot to eat when he listened to the wind. Once during breakfast, Noah Loomis dropped a tin plate on the porch when delivering a note from Harriet, and Cole was standing before anyone else had flinched, one hand raised in a half-command that died before it became words. Atlas crossed the room and pressed his head under Cole's palm. Cole looked down, breathed once, and sat. Ada continued buttering toast as if nothing had happened. Mara saw everything. She stored it with the ledger, the roof groan, and the silver ring matters that could not yet be paid. The farm did not care about emotional confusion. The pump froze twice. The cattle broke a manger board. One window in the barn iced so thick on the inside that Cole took it out, cleaned the frame, and re-hung it with a strip of cloth to reduce the draft. He worked with the precision of a carpenter, the patience of a nurse, and the silence of a locked room. His injured hand improved, though he favored it when he thought no one watched. Atlas improved too. The dog's limp faded on easier ground, but hard cold brought it back. Ada made him a padded place near the stove from an old quilt and declared it necessary for military comfort. Cole said Atlas had slept in worse places. Ada answered that this house was not interested in lowering its standards to worse places. Atlas accepted the quilt and the victory with equal grace. Little humor came like that, small enough not to frighten the grief in the room. Mara found herself waiting for it. That bothered her. Waiting was a kind of wanting, and wanting was foolish when a marriage had been built with the same practicality as a snow brace. By the 10th day, Cole began measuring the yard. Not with a carpenter's folding rule, like a man from the old stories might carry, but with a length of cord, 2 stakes, and a small compass he kept in his parka pocket. He started at the north wall of the house, walked 30 paces toward the line where the land rose gently, stopped, turned, watched the sky, and moved 5 paces west. Atlas followed with solemn attention. Mara stood at the barn door with a feed bucket on her hip. "Are you planning to invade my hayfield?" Cole glanced back. "Only a small occupation." "Should I alert the governor? Maybe after lunch." "That sounds serious." "It is. I will need your worst boards." "My worst boards are currently part of structures I am fond of." "Then your second worst boards." Mara set down the bucket. "What are you building?" He looked toward the northwest where the storm wind entered the valley through a saddle between 2 dark ridges. Snow moved there even when the rest of the yard seemed calm, a low, crawling smoke across the ground. "A fence that does not act like a wall." "That is a strange ambition for a fence. Most fences are." He said it so dryly that she almost smiled. Then he added, "A solid wall makes the wind climb and drop hard on the other side." Sometimes it piles snow where you least want it. A porous barrier slows it, lets some through, steals its strength without starting a fight it cannot win. Mara looked at him. You talk about wind like it is a stubborn neighbor. That is one way to put it. Orrin Blake will hate this. Then we should make sure it works before he sees it. Orrin saw it by afternoon. The rancher rode in on a thick bay horse with a frost-white mane wrapped in a sheepskin coat and suspicion. Orrin had lived 2 miles south of the Harrow place for 30 years and considered Weather a personal adversary, though not one he expected anyone to outsmart. He watched Cole drive posts into the frozen ground with an iron bar and a sledge, leaving gaps where Mara expected boards. The barrier stretched in a rough line northwest of the house, not tall enough to look impressive, not solid enough to satisfy common sense. Atlas supervised from adrift, occasionally carrying a stake in the wrong direction with cheerful importance. Dog helping? Orrin asked. He believes so, Cole said. Atlas dropped the stake at Mara's feet, tail high. She picked it up. This is not where it goes. Atlas sat. He also believes confidence is the same as accuracy. Cole's mouth twitched. Orrin did not seem amused. He nodded toward the gaps. If you are stopping wind, stop it. I am slowing it. Wind doesn't slow because you ask polite. No. Cole drove another post. It slows when it spends energy passing through. Orrin spat into the snow. You military fellows learn that overseas? The sledge stopped in Cole's hands. The pause was short, but the air changed. Mara looked from Orrin to Cole. Atlas stood. I have worked in cold places, Cole said. That all? Orrin asked. Mara stepped in before the silence sharpened. That is more answer than your question earned. Orrin looked at her, then at the ring on her hand, then away. No offense meant. Then you will not mind being told when you found it. Ada, watching from the kitchen windows, later said Mara had looked like her father at a cattle auction, which was not entirely a compliment. Orrin stayed long enough to question the angle of the barrier, the height of the posts, the way Cole wove scrap boards with willow branches rather than nailing them flat. Cole answered what was useful and ignored what was not. By dusk, the first stretch stood complete, crooked to the eye, deliberate to the compass, a ribbed, dark line in the snow. Mara still did not understand all of it, but as evening winds strengthened, she saw the loose powder strike the barrier feather upward and settle beyond it rather than slamming straight into the house. It was not magic. That made it more impressive. Magic could be dismissed. Good work had to be reckoned with. The next morning, Cole turned to the house itself. Along the north wall, where snow had banked deep and cold crept through the lower logs, he built an outer skirt from rough boards held away from the wall by narrow spacers. Behind some sections, he tucked dry straw inside burlap, careful not to press it tight against the logs. At the bottom, he left small channels for damp air to escape. Mara knelt beside him, holding nails in a tin cup. If you are making the house warmer, why leave holes? Because warm and wet becomes rot. Holes make cold. Controlled holes dry. You enjoy sounding impossible, only before noon. After noon, I become unbearable. She handed him a nail. Their fingers touched through gloves. Nothing dramatic happened, no music descended. He simply took the nail and looked at her as if aware of the contact and determined not to claim more from it than she offered. That restraint again. The house made a small popping sound in the cold. Mara looked away. My father would have packed straw tight and nailed boards flat over it. Many men would. Are you saying my father was wrong? Cole set the nail. I am saying he built for the winters he knew. This one is teaching us its own name. That answer settled into her. Elias had taught Mara many things. How to judge hay by smell, how to set a splint on a calf, how to bargain with a merchant who smiled too much. He had also believed his own fences would last forever, his own body would give warning before failing, and his daughter would have more time before being left with everything. Love made people sacred in memory. It did not make every board they nailed perfect. Mara hated Cole a little for making that thought possible. She liked him a little for saying it gently. By the end of the day, they had skirted half the north wall. Ada stepped outside, wrapped in 2 shawls to inspect the work, and stayed too long in the cold. Cole noticed before Mara did. He said nothing. He only crossed the yard, lifted the second shawl higher around Ada's shoulders, and angled his body so the wind struck him instead of her. Ada looked up at him surprised, then patted his sleeve once. Mara saw from the pump. Cole did not see Mara seeing. That mattered more than if he had. In the days that followed, a rhythm formed, and with rhythm came danger of another kind. Mara began to know the sound of Cole's step on the porch, lighter than a man his size should make. She learned that he took coffee black, but forgot it unless Ada pushed the cup toward his elbow. She learned that Atlas would obey down instantly from Cole, consider it thoughtfully from Mara, and ignore Noah unless Noah had sausage. She learned that Cole could mend harness poorly, but tie any knot as if the rope had confessed its purpose to him. She learned that he carried guilt in the muscles around his eyes, not sadness exactly. Readiness for blame. One night after supper, Ada told a story about Elias trying to smoke a ham in the old shed and nearly turning it into shoe leather. Mara laughed, then stopped because Cole was laughing too quietly with a rusty sound that seemed to surprise him. Atlas lifted his head, pleased. Ada kept talking, voice warm in the stove light. For a few minutes the house felt not healed, not whole, but inhabited by more than endurance. Then a gust struck the north wall. Smoke from the stove hesitated, rolled thinly under the lid, and carried a bitter smell into the room. Ada coughed. Cole was on his feet. "Damper," he said, already moving. He adjusted the stove, opened the door for a controlled breath of air, then stepped outside with a lantern. Mara followed before he could tell her not to. Snow stung her face. Cole stood in the yard studying the chimney, the roof ridge, the new wind barrier, and the saddle beyond the field. "What happened?" she asked. "Wind curled behind the ridge and pushed back against the draft. Can you fix it?" "I can improve it." "That is not a yes." "It is the honest cousin of yes." He climbed the ladder despite her protest, measured the chimney stack, then came down and marked boards under the porch roof. By morning he had raised the stack and added a simple hood angled to help the smoke lift clear. Orrin rode by near noon and saw the new work. "Chimney needed height," he called. Cole looked up from the woodpile. "It needed cleaner air." Orrin snorted. "Chimneys breathe now. Everything breathes poorly if you put pressure on the wrong side." Orrin shook his head, but his eyes moved to the smoke rising straight into the pale afternoon. Mara saw the question in his face before pride covered it. That evening the wind shifted again. The stove drew clean. Ada slept without coughing for 4 hours. Mara sat awake longer than necessary, listening to that clean draw, feeling gratitude, suspicion, and a reluctant thread of respect twist together until she could not separate them. Around midnight she rose for water and found Cole sitting on the floor beside Atlas, back against the wall, head bowed. His hand rested in the dog's ruff. He was awake, not fully in the room, but not gone either. "Cole." His eyes lifted. For 1 second they were far away. Then Atlas nudged his wrist and he returned. "Sorry," he said. "For what?" "Being in the way." He was not in the way. That was the trouble. He had become useful, present, careful, and still unknown. Mara stood in the dark with the cup in her hand. "Who did you lose?" The question left before she had decided to ask it. Cole's face closed so quietly it hurt to watch. "Not tonight." She nodded. Pride told her to be offended. Weariness told her to accept the boundary. Something kinder, not yet named, told her that a locked door might still mean someone was alive behind it. "Then drink your water," she said. "You look like a ghost who forgot to haunt anyone." A breath of laughter escaped him. "Yes, ma'am. And stop calling me ma'am. We are married. It makes the whole thing stranger." "Mara," he said. Her name in the dark sounded like a promise he was afraid to make. The next afternoon, Noah arrived with Harriet's empty basket and found Cole adjusting the wind fence. The boy lingered, asking about knots, whether the military, whether courage felt different after training. Cole answered the knot questions. He answered the weather questions. He avoided the rest until Noah, with the bluntness of youth and cold ears, said, "My aunt thinks I should stay here forever stacking hay. I want to do something that matters." Cole stopped threading willow through the posts. "Hay matters when people need to eat. You know what I mean." "I do." Cole looked toward Atlas, who was attempting to pull a buried glove from the snow and losing a private war. "Doing something that matters is not the same as going somewhere people will clap when you come home." Noah flushed. "I am not looking for clapping. Good. It is unreliable." Mara, carrying a board nearby, smiled despite herself. Cole turned the board in her hands to show where the grain had cracked. He did not take it from her. He only showed. That was becoming his way when he remembered. The snow began again near dusk, fine and hard. By morning they discovered the flaw in the new fence. The main drift had formed where Cole wanted it, beyond the barrier and away from the house, but one angled section had thrown loose snow toward the narrow path between the kitchen door and the barn. The path was half filled, exactly where Mara needed it kept clear for feed and water. She stood with hands on hips. Cole stood beside her, expression unreadable. "You measured that twice," she said. "I did." "You watched the wind." "I did." "And it was still wrong." "Yes." The plainness of the answer took the pleasure from complaint. He did not defend himself. He did not blame the storm for behaving rudely. He pulled 3 marker sticks from his pocket and pushed them into the drift, noting its shape. Then he removed a whole panel and reset it at a different angle. Atlas carried one willow branch away and buried it, which Cole described as unapproved storage. Mara laughed before she could stop herself. Cole looked over, and for a heartbeat, the yard seemed less cold. The next snowfall was lighter. The path stayed cleaner. No one celebrated. Nature had answered, and Cole had listened. That night, Bracken was not there, because Bracken belonged to another life in another version of the tale. But Atlas rose from beside the stove, crossed the room, and settled not at Cole's feet, but between Cole's cot and Mara's chair. A bridge, perhaps, or a guard post. Ada looked over her knitting and said, "That dog has decided we are all one problem now." Cole touched Atlas's ear. "He likes complicated work." Mara looked at the north wall, the repaired window, the chimney drawing clean, the stranger who was legally her husband and not yet close enough to be anything simpler. Outside, snow tapped the glass. Inside, the silver ring warmed slowly on her hand. Then Atlas lifted his head toward the road, ears sharp. A moment later, faint through the weather, came the sound of an engine struggling where no engine should have been able to travel. The engine noise came and went under the wind, a low mechanical growl smothered by snow. Then a cough. Then silence. Then the stubborn churn of tires trying to find earth beneath ice. Mara reached the porch before Cole could stop her, though she heard his boots behind her and Atlas's paws striking the boards with purposeful force. Night had settled blue over the Harrow farm, but the storm held enough reflected light for the road to appear as a pale trench between dark cottonwoods. At the bend, a pair of headlights glowed like tired eyes. Someone had made it farther than sense allowed, and not far enough to be safe. "Stay on the porch," Cole said. Mara turned. "You are getting comfortable with commands for a man sleeping in my front room." He caught himself at once. "Sorry. Please stay where the ground is known until I check the drift." That was different. Not softer exactly, but truer to the bargain they had been learning by trial and correction. Mara lifted the lantern. "We go together." Cole looked as if he might object. Atlas stepped between them and gave a short bark toward the road, settling the matter in his own chain of command. They tied a rope from the porch post to the first fence line, then another from the fence to the cottonwood near the bend. Cole moved ahead, testing the ground with a staff. Mara followed, one hand on the rope, lantern low so the light did not blind her against the snow. The cold was sharp enough to make breath feel breakable. At the road bend, they found Leander Crow, though none of them knew his name yet, standing beside a county service truck with a dented plow blade and a face full of regret. He was broad, middle-aged, wrapped in a canvas coat, and embarrassed in the particular way of a man who had ignored his own advice. "Evening," he called. "That is a generous word for it," Mara answered. Leander looked from her to Cole and then to Atlas. His gaze caught on the dog first, stayed a second too long, then moved to Cole's face. The recognition did not arrive all at once. It gathered. The man's mouth parted. Cole's shoulders tightened. Atlas moved closer to Cole's knee, not threatening, simply present. "Mercer," Leander said. The name was quiet, but the night seemed to hear it. Mara looked at Cole. "You know him." Cole did not answer quickly enough. Leander took one step forward, squinting through the snow. "Cole Mercer. I thought you were back east, or with the Ridge outfit, or anywhere except buried on a farm road outside Bozeman." Cole's voice came low. "Leander." It was a warning, not a greeting. Leander understood it after he had already walked past it. His eyes went to Mara's ring, then to the house, then back to Cole's torn parka and bandaged hand. "I heard your uncle had people calling every station after that truck went missing. Ephraim is fit to peel paint. Mercer Ridge has half the county contracts waiting on your signature, and here you are shoveling snow in a borrowed yard." The words did not strike loudly. They sank. County contracts, uncle, signature, Mercer Ridge. Mara held the lantern so still that melted snow ran down the glass in a clear line. "What is Mercer Ridge?" she asked. Leander looked from Mara to Cole and finally understood he had not uncovered a harmless surprise. "Ma'am, I did not mean to step in the middle of anything. People keep stepping into my yard with news they should have brought before supper." Cole closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, the pale blue had gone flat with resignation. "Mara let me get him to the house before he freezes." "No!" The word surprised even her, not because it was uncertain, but because it was small. The storm filled the space after it. "Tell me enough to know whether I am standing beside my husband or a story you let me marry." Leander flinched at that. Cole looked toward the house, where Ada's curtain moved faintly in the kitchen window. Atlas pressed his head against Cole's thigh, a steadying touch. "Mercer Ridge Response is a company," Cole said. "Emergency logistics, winter rescue planning, canine training. Some federal work, mostly mountain counties now." Mara waited. "I helped start it." Waited. "I still own a large share." Leander made a soft sound that might have been correction. Cole glanced at him. "A controlling share." The lantern handle bit into Mara's palm. She remembered the barn floor, the cedar blanket, the bread she had counted before setting it on his plate, the careful arithmetic of another mouth in a house where potatoes were measured by week. She remembered the church, the ring, the way he had said he had no cash worth naming, narrow truth, a truth trimmed until it could pass through a keyhole. "How many people work for you?" she asked. Cole's jaw moved once. "It changes by season." "How many?" Leander answered because Cole could not. "Full-time, around 40 now, more when storms hit." "Trainers, handlers, drivers, radio people." 40. Mara heard Ada coughing lightly behind the window, heard Atlas breathing, heard the wind scraping snow along the fence Cole had built with scrap lumber while owning a company that could buy every board in Gallatin County. "I see, Mara," Cole said. "No, not here." Her voice remained level, which frightened her more than shouting would have. "Mr. Crow, if your truck can be moved, we will help move it. If not, you can warm yourself in the kitchen before turning back or sleeping in the barn." My mother will not have a man freeze because my husband misplaced the truth. Leander had the sense to nod. Cole had the sense not to reach for her. They freed the county truck enough to bring it into the Harrow yard, where Orrin Blake's old plow path gave it shelter from the worst drift. Leander came inside, removed his hat, apologized to Ada twice, and drank coffee with a man awaiting sentence. Ada listened to the explanation without interruption. Her eyes rested on Cole longer than Mara's could bear to. "So," Ada said at last, "you are not penniless." Cole sat across from her, hands folded Atlas beside his chair. "No, ma'am." "And not helpless?" "No." "But were you hungry when my daughter fed you?" The question struck strangely. Cole looked at the table. "Yes." "Were you cold?" "Yes." "Was the dog limping?" "Yes." Ada nodded once. "Then some of what we saw was true." Mara stared at her mother. Ada looked back with weary gentleness. "I did not say enough was true." That was the knife with the cloth around it. Cole accepted it without defense. Leander told them what could not be hidden now. Cole Mercer had served years as a Navy SEAL, later working with Atlas as a military canine in Special Operations support. After leaving active service, he had helped build Mercer Ridge Response, a company known for winter emergency planning, search dogs, remote supply routes, and training programs for mountain counties. He owned property near Virginia Beach and another place outside Denver. He had money, staff, equipment standing. His truck accident had indeed stranded him without immediate cash communication or transport in the storm, but he had not been a man with nowhere else in the world. He had been a man whose elsewhere had been looking for him. The kitchen seemed smaller with every fact. Mara did not ask how much he was worth. Money had not betrayed her by being large. Silence had. She stood. "Mr. Crow, there are blankets in the barn loft. Coffee before you go in the morning. Mother, your medicine is by the stove." Ada looked ready to speak, then thought better of it. Cole rose when Mara moved toward the door. "I should have told you before the wedding." "Yes." "What I did here was real." Mara stopped with her hand on the latch. Snow tapped the window behind him. The man looked as he had on the road, tired, controlled, waiting for a verdict he would not argue. "The work was real," she said. "The hands were real. That is not the question." "I know." "Do you?" She turned. "Because I married a man I thought needed this house. I thought necessity would keep you here long enough for winter not to kill us by inches. It was not noble. It was not romantic. It was survival. And you let me believe survival bound us equally." His face changed then, not with surprise, but with pain, recognized too late. "I am sorry. I do not know what that purchases." "Nothing. At least we agree." She opened the door. Cold swept in. Atlas rose, torn between them. Mara looked at the dog, and that almost undid her. Atlas had not lied. Atlas had asked for warm water, leaned against Ada, warned of the barn roof, carried steaks badly, and slept between rooms as if love could be assigned a patrol route. "Stay," Cole said softly. The dog remained standing. Mara stepped out before she could watch him choose. The barn was bitter. She did not go there. Instead, she stood under the porch roof until her anger became cold enough to handle. Cole did not follow. That was wise and terrible. She wanted him to follow so she could send him away. She wanted him not to follow so she could hate him for letting her go. The snow made a hush over both desires. Later, through the frosted kitchen window, she saw Cole cross the yard carrying his duffel. He went to the barn. He slept where she had first put him, though he had every legal right, perhaps every marital right, according to men who liked simple answers, to remain under the house roof. Atlas stood in the yard between barn and house for nearly a minute. Then he came to the kitchen door and scratched once. Ada let him in. Mara did not object. Pride had limits. The dog went to the rug, turned twice, and laid his head on his paws facing the barn. The next morning arrived clear and cruel. Sun struck the snow so brightly the yard seemed made of broken glass. Leander left after breakfast, apologizing again. Before he climbed into the truck, Mara caught him near the gate. What was he like when people worked under him? Leander removed one glove and rubbed his face. That is a large question. I am in a large mood. He almost smiled. Then he glanced toward the barn where Cole was splitting wood with careful, punishing rhythm. He was hard on sloppy work, harder on himself. Slept in field shelters when he could have taken hotel rooms. Shut down a county training contract once because the road crews were being pushed into bad weather for a demonstration. Cost the company plenty. Save people embarrassment, at least maybe worse. He does not care for praise, makes him look seasick. Mara watched Cole set a split log on the pile. Why did he leave? Leander's expression grew serious. You need that from him. He may not give it. He will, if you ask plainly enough. Everyone says that as if plain asking opens locked doors. No, but it tells the person inside you are not guessing anymore. Leander tightened the strap on his load. There was a winter operation overseas years back. I do not know details, and if I did, I would not spill them in your yard. He came home with Atlas hurt and one of his people gone. After that, every storm sounded personal to him. He built a company to prevent bad weather from becoming a tragedy, then walked away when people started treating his judgment like a guarantee. He warned people? Often. Then why carry it like guilt? Leander looked at the bright snow. Because command teaches a man that responsibility and blame sleep in the same coat. Some never learn to hang it up. He left after that, the truck crawling down the road between white banks. Mara stood at the gate long after the sound faded. In the barn, Cole kept splitting wood, not dramatically, not to punish the wood, just one log, then another. As if work could build a wall around what words had broken. Ada called Mara in before her fingers numbed. You will not solve a marriage by freezing your thumbs. I am not solving anything. Then you are wasting cold. Mara came inside. The house held a faint warmth from the stove better than before because of Cole's boards and vents and angled fence. That irritated her too. Betrayal would have been simpler if it had come from a useless man. She could have thrown him out and suffered cleanly. But the pump worked. The chimney drew. The path stayed clearer. Ada had slept better. The cattle had not been crushed under the barn roof. His usefulness remained stubborn as a nail. For 3 days, Mara and Cole spoke only when the farm required it. The heifer needs hay. The lower hinge is freezing. Ada's tonic is low. Storm clouds over the ridge. Words like boards laid across a creek, enough to cross, not enough to linger. Cole asked before changing anything. Before moving a stack of lumber, he asked. Before opening the north wall to check dampness, he asked. Before adjusting the wind fence, he asked. Mara answered shortly but fairly. If the idea was sound, she allowed it. If she did not understand, he explained, without making ignorance feel like a debt. That was almost worse than arrogance. Arrogance would have let anger keep its boots on. On the third evening, Noah arrived with a note from Harriet and found Cole repairing a broken sled runner. The boy's awe had not dimmed after Leander's accidental revelation. It had sharpened. Is it true you were a SEAL? Noah asked. Mara, carrying feed nearby, stopped without seeming to. Cole did not look up. Yes. Did you do dangerous missions? Everyone who works in bad weather does dangerous things if they stop paying attention. Noah frowned. That is not what I meant. I know. Cole set the runner aside. Ask me about dogs, knots, radios, cold, injuries, how to keep a truck kit, how to read adrift. I will answer. If you want stories that make harm sound exciting, I am the wrong man. The boy flushed. Mara felt against her will respect move quietly through her. Cole had not shamed him. He had drawn a line. Noah scuffed snow with one boot. "How do you know if you are brave?" Atlas, who had been lying nearby, rose and shoved his nose into Noah's mitten. The boy looked down. Cole's face softened. "Sometimes you know because your hands are shaking, and you do the useful thing anyway. Sometimes you know because you stay home when someone needs you there, even if leaving would make a better story." Noah absorbed that in silence. Mara did too. That night she crossed the yard to the barn. Cole was sitting on an overturned bucket, cleaning Atlas's paws with a cloth, checking between the pads for ice. He looked up when she entered, but did not stand. Good. If he had, she might have lost the courage she had assembled piece by piece all day. "Tell me why you left," she said. Cole's hand stilled in Atlas's fur. The dog leaned against him. "Mara. Not the public version, not the trimmed one. I am tired of narrow truths." The barn smelled of hay-cold leather and the animal warmth of cattle. Outside, the wind moved loose snow against the boards in soft fists. Cole looked at Atlas, then at the roof brace, then at Mara. When he finally spoke, his voice was even, but every word seemed carried from a great distance. He told her about a valley far from Montana, about a winter operation meant to move people to safety before weather closed the passes, about maps that were good, but not good enough, forecasts that shifted orders, delayed by voices far away, and a choice he had questioned, but not broken. He did not describe harm in detail. He did not make suffering a spectacle. He spoke of names, responsibility, waiting, the terrible quiet after a storm, the way a handler remembers a dog's breathing in the dark. Atlas had been hurt. A teammate had not come home. A child they had tried to protect had been lost to the consequences of delay and weather and human certainty. Cole had warned. Cole had obeyed. Cole had survived. "After that," he said, "every roofline looked like a decision, every blocked road, every draft in a chimney. People would ask me what to do, and I could feel them placing their lives in my answer. Mercer Ridge grew because I wanted fewer families waiting for help that came too late. Then it grew large enough that people started saying my name like a guarantee. I could not breathe inside it." Mara stood very still. Understanding opened inside her, unwelcome and painful. It did not erase the lie. It explained the wound beneath it. Those were different mercies. "So you came here because we were small enough to fix?" she asked. Cole flinched, but he did not dodge. "At first, maybe. A pump, a barn roof, a chimney, work that did not require 40 people trusting me. And me." "You were never small." The answer came too fast to be polished. Mara looked away. Atlas crossed the few feet between them and pressed his head against her hand. She had not called him. The dog's fur was warm, coarse, real. She let her fingers rest there. "I am still angry," she said. "You should be. Do not make my anger easy by agreeing with everything." For the first time in days, his mouth moved toward a smile. It did not quite arrive. "I will try to be less cooperative." "Good." She looked at him, then really looked. Husband, stranger, wounded man, useful liar, gentle keeper of an impossible dog. "You will sleep in the barn until I decide otherwise." "Yes." "You will keep asking before changing my house." "Yes." "And tomorrow you will show me how to read the snow at the wind fence, not because I forgive you, because it is my farm." Cole nodded. Something like relief entered his face, cautious as a match in wind. "Yes, Mara." She left before softness could ask too much of her. Behind her, Atlas huffed at Cole, perhaps approving, perhaps exhausted by humans. Outside, the sky had cleared enough for stars to show above the white fields. Mara crossed back to the house with cold on her cheeks and the truth under her coat. Heavy, but no longer shapeless. At the porch, she turned once. Cole stood in the barn doorway, a dark figure in a line of lantern light, not calling after her, not leaving either. Beyond him, the northwest saddle waited under the moon, filling slowly with the next bank of cloud. The next morning came with pale sun, and the cold so hard it made every hinge speak. Snow lay over the Harrow farm in long, shaped ridges, showing where the wind had argued all night with Cole's fences and found itself delayed, but not defeated. Mara stood beside the northwest barrier with a wool scarf pulled high around her mouth, holding the compass while Cole crouched in the drift and pressed a measuring stick down to the frozen ground. Atlas sat between them, dignified and lightly frosted, wearing the expression of a dog who had known all along that humans required several demonstrations before believing weather. "The drift tells you where the wind lost strength," Cole said. His voice was calm, not teacherly, not proud. Since the night in the barn, he had taken care with every explanation, as if each sentence had to knock before entering. "See how it piles heavy on this side and feathers out toward the path?" Mara looked. She saw snow. She saw deeper snow. She saw a white mess that had soaked through one boot and threatened her patience. "I see winter making itself comfortable." "That too. Do not humor me. I am not. Weather is mostly pattern wearing a bad mood." She looked at him over the scarf. "That sounds like something a man says after sleeping in a barn." "Barns improve philosophy." Atlas sneezed into the snow. Mara's mouth twitched, but she bent again to study the drift because the farm was hers, and pride was less useful than knowledge. Cole pointed with the stick, not touching her hand. "The barrier is doing part of the job. Here is the problem. This panel sends snow toward the barn path when the wind shifts 10 degrees west. I changed it once, but not enough." "So you were wrong twice?" "Yes." She expected him to stiffen. He did not. He pushed the stick deeper. "Being wrong early is cheaper than being wrong in a blizzard." The sentence was plain, almost too plain. It carried the shape of his past without naming it. Mara felt anger stir, then settle. Anger had become tired of carrying every bucket alone. "What do we do?" she asked. Cole looked at her before answering, and she saw the small care he took with the word "we." "We move the panel another 6 feet south, open the top third more, and mark the next snowfall. Or we leave it and clear the path after every storm." "Which would you choose?" "This is your farm. That is not an answer. No, it is me trying not to take one from you." The cold air between them thinned. Mara looked toward the barn, then the house, then the path Ada would never walk in winter, but Mara would walk 10 times a day. She imagined deep snow at midnight, a coughing mother, a cow in trouble, arms full of wood. "Move it," she said. 6 feet south, open the top." Cole nodded once, no flourish. "Yes." They worked until noon, pulling posts from ground that did not wish to release them. The job was clumsy and cold. Mara's fingers numbed, Cole's bad hand slowed, and Atlas stole one glove and carried it 20 yards away before lying on it as if protecting equipment from fools. Mara called him a traitor. Cole said, "He prefers logistics officer." She laughed, and the laugh came out white in the air. It startled her less than before. Around midday, Orrin Blake rode over with a coil of rope and unsolicited judgment. He studied the dismantled section. "Thought the fancy fence was finished." Mara drove a stake into the snow. "Weather disagreed." Orrin looked at Cole. "So you are rebuilding it?" "Yes." "After measuring it?" "Yes." "After telling us the gaps were on purpose, they still are." Orrin's mustache carried frost. His eyes carried satisfaction. "A man who knows everything still gets snow in the wrong place." Cole straightened slowly. Atlas stood too. For a second, Mara thought the old pride or the old wound might answer. Cole only looked at the drift. "Snow is generous that way. It educates everyone." Orrin snorted, but the pleasure went out of his face because humility, when genuine, leaves little for mockery to chew. Mara hid her smile by lifting the sledge. If you came to watch stand down win. If you came to help hold this post, Oren helped. He complained while doing it, which was his natural music. By afternoon, the panel stood at its new angle, ugly and promising. Cole placed 3 marker sticks where he expected the next drift to form. Mara placed 2 more where she thought it might betray them. Cole did not correct her. He nodded. Good. Do not sound surprised, I am not. You looked surprised. That was windburn. Oren gave a laugh like gravel in a pail. Even Mara smiled. The next 2 days passed clear, then cloud gathered over the Gallatin Range with a slow seriousness that made every animal on the farm move closer to shelter. Cole spent those days checking the house skirt he had built along the north wall. When he opened one inspection board, he found dampness in the straw. Not much, but enough. He pulled the material free and set it in a wheelbarrow. Mara watched his jaw tighten. Too wet, too tight, he said. I packed this section more than I meant to. The bottom edge is too low. Melt runs in air cannot move. Can it rot the logs? If left, yes. Then remove it. I already am. He did not wait for Oren to see the mistake. He did not hide it. He opened the whole section, took out the damp straw, raised the bottom boards, cut better vents, and set the insulation back with more space. Mara handed him tools. The house wall exposed in patches looked vulnerable, like an old scar uncovered. Does it bother you? She asked. Being wrong? Being seen being wrong. Cole paused with the pry bar in his hand. Snow melted from the roof in slow drops behind them. It used to. And now? He looked at the darkened straw in the wheelbarrow. Wood does not care whether I am embarrassed. It only cares whether it dries. The words were so much like him that Mara felt the strange ache of wanting to know how long he had been learning such lessons the hard way. People care, she said. He looked up. Yes. People remember. Yes. People also need to know if the wall is damp. A small smile came and went. That they do. By evening, the repaired wall breathed better. Cole left one board loose enough for Mara to open. He showed her how to check for damp by smell, touch, and frost pattern, then stepped aside and made her do it herself. She did not like how satisfying it was. The next morning, smoke backed into the kitchen again, not as badly as before, but enough to wake Ada coughing. Cole moved quickly and quietly. He adjusted the stove, opened the storm side window a crack for pressure relief, and went outside with a lantern, though dawn had barely lifted. Mara followed, tying her scarf as she walked. You are not climbing that roof alone. I need to see the hood angle. Then I need to see you not fall. He accepted this with a look that weeks before might have been resistance. Progress was not always warm. Sometimes it was only the absence of a foolish argument. The chimney hood had shifted under ice. Cole secured it, then added a taller extension from a pipe section found behind the barn. The work was rough, temporary, and effective. Inside, the stove drew clean again. Ada, wrapped in 2 quilts, watched Cole warm his hands by the fire. Does it bother you that the house keeps humbling you? She asked. Cole glanced at Mara. Your daughter asked something similar. She gets her better questions from me. I suspected. Ada smiled. And your worse answers from whom? Mara asked. The Navy, Cole said before he could stop himself. The room went still for half a breath, then Ada chuckled. It was the first time he had spoken of that part of his life without the words arriving as confession or wound. Atlas, sensing laughter, thumped his tail. It struck the wood box, knocked one kindling stick to the floor, and startled himself so thoroughly that even Cole laughed. Later that afternoon, Harriet Loomis came with Noah and a basket of biscuits dense enough to brace a roof. Harriet had heard, as everyone had heard, that Cole Mercer was not poor, not simple, and not entirely explained by the ring on Mara's hand. Her concern had taken on a new flavor, less scandal, more suspicion on Mara's behalf. "I would have brought pie," Harriet said, setting the basket on Ada's table. But pie seemed too friendly. Ada inspected the biscuits. "These are not unfriendly, they are just determined." Noah drifted toward the yard where Cole was coiling rope. The boy had questions burning holes in his pockets. Mara saw Cole notice and make room without inviting worship. "You want to learn something useful?" Cole asked. Noah nodded. "Tie this around that post. Make it hold under pull, but release when your hands are cold." "Is that a military knot?" "It is a don't lose your cow knot. Far more common." Noah grinned despite himself. Harriet watched from the doorway, arms folded. "He talks about joining up every day now." Cole's hands slowed. "Does he?" "Says there is no future in fences and feed bills." Mara looked toward Noah, who was frowning at the rope in deep concentration. She recognized the hunger in him. Not for danger exactly. For shape. For a life with edges clearer than chores. Cole walked over to Harriet, keeping his voice low enough that Noah would not hear every word. "I can teach him winter skills. Rope radio basics, animal handling, storm kits. Things that serve here or anywhere. I do not want him filled with stories. I do not tell that kind." Harriet studied him. "Because you are honorable, because some stories shrink people when told wrong." The answer quieted her. Mara, standing near the pump, felt it quiet something in herself too. That evening, after Harriet left, Noah stayed to help move hay. Cole showed him how to make a drag sled from scrap boards, not as a grand lesson, just work. Atlas decided the drag sled was suspicious and placed himself in front of it until Noah solemnly asked permission to proceed. The dog stepped aside with the air of a gatekeeper granting a visa. Mara found herself laughing openly then. Cole looked up from the rope and the softness in his face vanished so quickly she almost missed it. Not because he did not feel it, because he did. Snow began again after supper, light at first, then heavier wind turning west by degrees. Cole and Mara stood at the window near midnight, watching the marker sticks disappear. "You should sleep," he said. "You first. I am serious. So am I. Besides, this is my education." The new panel worked better. The drift formed farther out, leaving a narrow, clean strip between house and barn. Mara felt a practical satisfaction that warmed more than praise. "There," she said. "Weather has approved my 2 sticks." Cole nodded. "It has. You may admit they were excellent sticks. They were well placed. That sounded painful for you." "I endured." She smiled into the dark. The smile faded when she saw his reflection in the window, his gaze, not on the drift, but somewhere beyond it. "What happened to Atlas's leg?" Cole's face changed. He looked down at the dog sleeping near the stove. For a long moment, Mara thought he would say, "Not tonight." Instead, he said, "Weather, metal, and bad timing. He kept working until we were clear." "That is all?" "That is all I can say without making a wound perform for us." Mara absorbed that. It was exactly the kind of line he had drawn for Noah, now offered to her. Not secrecy for its own sake, protection of something sacred from becoming spectacle. "Does it still hurt him?" "In hard, cold." "And you?" The question had slipped its leash. Cole did not pretend not to understand. "In hard, quiet." Outside, the wind moved through the barrier with a low rushing sound, slowed, but not stopped. Mara looked at him in the reflection. "Then we will keep the house noisy enough." Ada, who had apparently been awake in her chair, said without opening her eyes, "I can cough on schedule if needed." Atlas lifted his head. Cole laughed silently, shoulders shaking once, and the room loosened. For the first time since the truth came out, Mara did not feel only anger sitting beside him. She felt anger, yes, but also the beginning of knowledge. Knowledge was more troublesome. Anger could leave a room. Knowledge followed with a lantern. By morning, the repaired fence had passed its small test. The path was clearer, the house wall dry behind the inspection board, the chimney drawing clean. Mara opened the board herself, checked the space, and closed it with a nod. Cole watched, but did not speak until she looked at him. "Well?" she asked. "You read it right." "Good." "You sound surprised at yourself." "Windburn," she said. He smiled then, real and brief. Before either of them could say more, Atlas rose so suddenly that his claws scraped the floor. His ears fixed toward the road. A horse appeared beyond the cottonwoods, rider bent low, moving fast through fresh snow. Noah. He came into the yard, breathless, face pale under his cap. "Miss Ada's medicine," he gasped. "Aunt Harriet says the store is almost out and the barometer is falling hard. Mr. Blake says the next storm may close the road for days." Cole took the note, read it once, and looked toward the northwest saddle. The clouds there were not gathering. They were stacking dark upon dark like a wall being built by unseen hands. Atlas moved to Cole's side. Mara felt the house, the barn, her mother, the cattle, the road, the thin stock of medicine, every unpaid bill and unasked question draw into one hard point. Cole folded the note and did not make a prediction. That frightened her more than if he had. By mid-morning, the sky over Bozeman had lowered into a flat pewter lid, and the whole valley seemed to wait beneath it with its breath held. The storm had not yet arrived, but its servants had. A strange stillness in the pines, a pressure in the ears. Horses turning their rumps toward the northwest before any visible wind came. Smoke rising from the Harrow chimney straight for a few feet, then bending sharply as if struck by an invisible hand. Cole noticed all of it. Mara noticed him noticing and disliked how much comfort that gave her. A week ago, his attention had felt like secrecy. Now, even with the wound of his lie still between them, it felt like a lantern held near a dark stair. He stood at the kitchen table with Noah's note flattened under one hand, a stub of pencil in the other. Ada's medicine, a tonic and breathing powder from the general store, would last perhaps 2 days if used sparingly. The store had little left. The road might close before night. Harriet, practical beneath all her worry, had sent Noah early, while travel was still possible. "I can ride back and get it," Noah said. His cheeks were still red from the trip, and he had the bright, fearful eagerness of a boy who wanted to be useful before anyone could call him young. "Aunt Harriet said she can pay Mr. Bellamy and send it with me." "You are not riding alone with the barometer falling," Mara said. "I rode here." "That was before the wind turns." Noah looked to Cole, hoping for rescue from feminine sense. Cole did not provide it. "She is right." The boy's face fell. "I know the road. Knowing a road in fair weather is not the same as knowing where it disappears." Cole drew a rough map on brown wrapping paper. Harrow Farm, Loomis Place, General Store Creek Crossing, Blake Ranch, the county road. "We make the trip now, together, and bring back enough for Ada and Harriet. We also bring lamp oil, salt matches, and any spare batteries Mr. Bellamy has for the radio." Mara frowned. "Radio? My truck has one, if it survived. The county truck Leander brought may have a working set too. If roads close, voices matter." "And if the storm comes early?" Cole looked at the window, then at Atlas. The dog stood beside the door, ready but not excited. "Then we turn back before pride becomes expensive." Ada, from her chair, spoke without looking up from her mending. "That is a sentence worth sewing on a pillow." Mara went with them. Cole objected only by taking one breath and letting it go. Progress. They hitched Oren's borrowed sled to Noah's horse-loaded blankets, and a shovel tied a guide rope along the side rail and set out before noon. Atlas trotted beside Cole, wearing a working harness from the duffel Cole had finally opened in the barn. The harness was old, dark-patched at one strap, and carried no insignia, yet it changed the dog. Atlas became less household comedian, more instrument, tuned to purpose. He checked wind, scent, footing. When Noah let the rope coil loose, Atlas stepped on it and stared until the boy corrected it. "Does he always judge silently?" Noah asked. "Only when disappointed," Cole said. "So always." Mara allowed herself a smile. The road to the general store ran past Orrin Blake's ranch, then down toward the creek. Snow had filled the shallow cuts, but the old fence line gave them reference. Cole had Mara walk beside him rather than behind. He showed her how to read the small ripples on the snow surface where crust had formed, where loose powder hit a dip, where the wind had laid a cornice along the ditch edge. He did not lecture. He pointed, asked what she saw, waited. Sometimes she answered wrong. He corrected the snow, not her. "This line looks smooth," she said. "So safe." Smooth can mean hollow. He pressed the staff down and it punched through a thin crust into empty space near a culvert. Mara stared. "I hate that." "Good. Good? Dislike keeps people careful." Noah, overhearing, said, "I dislike chores. Does that make me careful?" "No," Mara said. "It makes you slow." The boy grinned. Even Cole smiled. They reached the store under a sky growing darker by the minute. Bellamy, the storekeeper, had a fire going, 2 other customers arguing softly about flour, and the pinched look of a man whose shelves were emptier than his promises. He gave Mara Ada's medicine wrapped in paper, Harriet's smaller packet, lamp oil, salt natches, and 3 battered batteries from a drawer. "Storm warning came by telephone before the line went fuzzy," he said. "They say heavy snow by midnight, wind worse after. County may close the North Road." Cole asked about the radio in the county truck. Bellamy scratched his chin. "If it is the old set, maybe. Leander knows it. He went toward Blake's place to check a culvert." "When?" "Hour ago." Cole looked toward the window. Snow had begun to fall fine and slanted. "We go now?" he said. No one argued. On the return, the weather changed with a speed that felt personal. Wind came low across the fields, driving snow against their left sides. Noah's horse tossed its head. Atlas moved ahead, then circled back, keeping the group tight. At the creek crossing, they found Leander's county truck angled near the culvert, empty, engine off. For one icy second, Mara feared the worst. Cole raised a hand. "No drama, listen." Atlas moved to the right, nose low, then looked back. Cole followed. Leander was 50 yards away by the bank, helping Orrin Blake secure a broken rail where cattle might wander toward the creek if visibility fell. No one was in immediate peril, only engaged in the ordinary foolishness by which neighbors kept one another alive. Mara almost laughed from relief and anger together. "You all choose weather like this to become civic-minded?" she called. Orrin looked up. "Storms do not schedule appointments." Leander saw Cole and lifted a hand. "Radio works, sort of. County frequency is choppy. They are telling folks to stay put." "Then we stay put after this," Cole said. The wind struck harder. A curtain of snow crossed the road behind them and erased the track they had made less than an hour before. Noah stared. The eager look had left him. In its place came something better, attention. Cole saw it too. "Noah, take Harriet's packet. You and Orrin go straight to her place by the creek fence, not the road. Tie off at the cottonwood line." "But Miss Ada's medicine." "Mara and I have it. Atlas knows our line home." Noah looked at the dog. Atlas looked back with calm authority. "Yes, sir." Cole's expression tightened at the "sir," but he let it pass. They separated at the creek, each group following the route most likely to hold. The trip from the crossing to the Harrow farm should have taken 20 minutes. It took almost an hour. Twice the world vanished beyond the rope length. Once Mara stepped into a drift up to her thigh and felt panic leap hot into her throat. Cole did not grab her. He planted his staff braced and said, "Stop. Breathe. Snow under your right knee is firm. Shift there." The instructions were calm, immediate, useful. She followed them and came free. Her hands shook afterward, not from cold. Cole saw. He did not mention it. Instead, he said, "You did the useful thing." She remembered his words to Noah. "My hands were shaking." They can shake and still work. That sentence stayed with her all the way home. Ada cried when she saw the medicine, then pretended she had not by scolding them for tracking snow. Atlas accepted a towel rub with noble suffering. Cole went back out before removing his coat, checking the barn, the pump, the fence, the woodpile, the truck radio. Mara followed after, settling Ada. "You need food," she said. After what? After the farm is set. The farm will keep inventing after." He looked at her, then face red from wind, eyelashes frosted. "That is true." The honesty disarmed her. She handed him a biscuit from Harriet's basket. "Eat while inventing." He took it. "This could stop a bullet. You are not allowed to test that." "Understood." "You smiled. That means you thought about it." "Briefly." She shook her head, and for a few minutes they worked with something almost companionable between them. They moved extra wood into the storm entry, brought hay down from the loft, filled every bucket, set a pan of snow near the stove for emergency water, and tied guide ropes between the house, barn pump, and wood lean-to. Cole opened his duffel again. This time Mara saw more: a compact first aid kit, a folded flag in a plastic sleeve, a small photograph turned inward, spare dog booties for Atlas, a battered field notebook, and a radio handset wrapped in cloth. He noticed her seeing. His hand hovered near the photograph, then moved away. "You can ask," he said. Mara could have asked about the photograph. She could have asked about the flag. Instead, she asked, "Do you have enough dog food?" The question surprised him, then softened him. 2 days of his regular. More if he accepts oatmeal diplomacy. "He will. My mother is a skilled negotiator." Atlas, hearing oatmeal, wagged from across the room. Ada slept through supper and woke near 8, feverish but breathing easier after the medicine. Mara sat beside her, wiping her face with a cool cloth. Cole remained near the stove, repairing a torn strap on Atlas's booty. The room glowed amber. Outside, the storm thickened. The windows had become white squares. The guide rope on the porch hummed under wind. Ada opened her eyes and looked at Cole. "You left because people trusted you too much." The room stilled. Mara looked up sharply, but Ada's gaze remained gentle. Cole's hands stopped on the strap. "Something like that." "That is a lonely kind of pride." Mara inhaled. "Mother?" Cole shook his head slightly. "It is all right." Ada's voice was thin but clear. "I do not mean arrogance. I mean thinking your mistake is powerful enough to cancel God's mercy. People do that when grief sits too long in the good chair." Cole looked down. Atlas rose and set his head on Cole's knee. For a while, no one spoke. The wind filled the silence. "I am not sure what I believe about mercy," Cole said. Ada closed her eyes. "That is all right. Mercy is not waiting for you to understand it before coming near." Mara felt the words settle into corners of the room no broom could reach. She was not ready to forgive him, but she could no longer pretend his sorrow was simple. Near midnight, the storm paused. Not ended. Paused, as if drawing breath. Cole used the lull to inspect the roof brace, the chimney, and the north wall. Mara went with him despite his look. The air outside was brutally still. Snow fell straight down in thick flakes that swallowed sound. At the barn, Atlas stopped before the door and refused to enter. His body changed head high, ears sharp, tail level. Cole froze. "What?" Mara whispered. Atlas moved toward the rear of the barn, then back, then toward the slope behind the property. Cole followed the dog's line of sight. Mara saw only darkness and snow. "There is movement up there," Cole said quietly. "An animal. Maybe snow settling." He did not sound convinced. The slope behind the barn was not steep like the mountains, but it held brush, drifted snow, and an old service track cut into the side of it. Cole had mentioned once that cut banks collected trouble. Mara had not enjoyed learning that land could remember poor decisions. They checked the barn from the outside, found no immediate danger, and returned to the house. Cole marked the slope in his notebook. "We watch it tomorrow, if the storm lets us. If it does not, we listen." The lull ended before dawn. Wind returned from the northwest with a force that made the house shudder. Snow no longer fell straight. It streamed, rattled, clawed, wrapped the world in white motion. The barometer needle at the kitchen shelf dropped again. Ada slept uneasily. Harriet's biscuits sat like masonry in a tin. Noah and Oren were presumably safe across the creek. The radio crackled once and gave only half a sentence from the county before dissolving into static. Cole adjusted the antenna face, intent. "What did it say?" Mara asked. "Stay sheltered, high winds, possible whiteout conditions through tomorrow." We knew that. Sometimes knowing is still useful when an official voice says it. The house creaked overhead. Atlas lifted his head. Not alarm yet. Attention. Mara looked at Cole. He was listening again, but this time he did not seem far away. He was in the room, in the storm, in the work. When his eyes met hers, he did not offer certainty. "We are prepared better than yesterday," he said. It was not comfort. It was a handhold. Mara nodded. "Then we do the useful thing." Cole's face changed, a flicker of recognition and something like gratitude. Outside, the snow drove harder against the north wall. Inside, the house held its breath and waited for the real test to begin. The blizzard found its full voice before breakfast, and by then the Harrow house had ceased to be a farmhouse in any ordinary sense. It had become a vessel creaking under pressure, warm in patches, cold at the seams, holding 4 humans and 1 German shepherd inside a white sea that no longer respected roads, fences, or the names people had given to land. Dawn was only a rumor behind the storm. The windows showed nothing but racing snow. The guide rope from porch to barn sang and snapped against its knots. The chimney drew "Thank God" and Cole's ugly hood, but the stove had to be fed carefully, because opening the door too quickly pulled a thin breath of smoke into the room. Ada slept in short stretches, fever lowered but not gone, her silver braid loose over the pillow Mara had brought down to the chair. Noah's packet had reached Harriet. They knew this because a brief radio message from Oren had come through near 5 in the morning, half static, half gruff. Triumph. "Loomis place secure. Boy, useful. Stop worrying, unless you enjoy it." Ada had smiled without opening her eyes. "Oren sends affection like a man throwing fence staples." Then she slept again. Mara moved through the house with a list in her head. Check stove, check Ada, check water buckets, check north wall inspection board, check window frost, check Atlas's paws, check Cole, though she did not write that item where anyone could see it. Cole worked in a rhythm that looked calm, until one noticed how often his gaze returned to the ceiling. He had reinforced the weak rafter, but the storm was loading snow unevenly across the roof, and wind from the saddle pressed against the house in pulses. When a gust struck, the logs answered with small sounds, pops and ticks, and the occasional groan that made Mara's teeth meet. "How much can it take?" she asked after one long shudder. Cole stood beneath the ceiling, one hand resting on the support post, not as if holding it up, but as if listening through bone. "More than it sounds like. Less than we would enjoy. That answer has no charm. I used it all on the chimney. The chimney is ugly, but faithful. She looked toward the stove where smoke rose cleanly. Fine. Charm granted. Atlas, lying near Ada's chair, thumped his tail once, perhaps in approval of civil negotiation. Near mid-morning, Cole and Mara made the first barn crossing. It was the kind of trip that would have seemed ridiculous in fair weather, 30 yards from door to door, familiar ground, rope in hand. In the blizzard, it became a small expedition, measured in breath and trust. Cole tied himself first, then Mara, then clipped Atlas's harness to a shorter lead so the dog could guide without being pulled into a drift. If visibility drops fully, keep your left hand on the rope and your right on my belt, Cole said. Mara raised an eyebrow. That sounds intimate for a man living in the barn. It sounds practical for a woman who dislikes ditches. I dislike being told where to put my hands. Then put them somewhere equally useful. Despite the storm, despite everything, she laughed. It vanished into the wind the moment they stepped out. Snow hit like thrown sand. The porch disappeared behind them in 6 paces. Atlas moved low and steady, not rushing. Twice he stopped, forcing them to stop. Once a loose board flew from the lean-to roof and skidded across the path ahead, harmless because the dog had halted them before it crossed. Mara's heart hammered, but Cole's voice came close to her ear. Good stop, Atlas. The dog did not wag. Work was work. They reached the barn, checked the cattle, broke ice from the trough, moved hay within reach, and inspected the roof. The temporary brace held. One rear corner leaked powder snow through a gap, but not enough to threaten the animals. Cole wanted to check the outside panel near the barn path. Mara looked at the door rattling under wind. Can it wait? He listened. The house had taught her that his silences had shapes. This one was calculation, not fear. It can wait 1 hour. Then we give it 1 hour. He nodded. No argument. Back inside, Ada woke and asked if the cattle had filed any complaints. Several, Mara said, pulling off her gloves. All about service. Tell them to write clearly. My eyesight is poor. Cole set snow-crusted boots by the door. One of them tried to eat my sleeve. That is the red heifer, Mara said. She believes fabric is a vegetable. Atlas shook himself before anyone could stop him. Snow flew over the floor, the stove wood, and Cole's pant leg. Ada opened one eye. Atlas, I expected better. The dog lowered his head, ashamed, for approximately 2 seconds, then sneezed. Even Cole smiled. These little moments kept the day from becoming only weather. Mara realized that was one of the marks of a life worth saving, not grand speeches, but oatmeal in a saucer, a joke about cattle, the way Ada could rebuke a dog as though he had joined the family by paperwork. The storm grew worse after noon. Radio contact disappeared. The north wall remained dry behind the inspection board, though frost formed along the old chinking near the floor. Cole adjusted the vents in the skirt opening, one leeward gap to let damp air escape, closing a windward one that had begun to whistle. Mara watched, then did the next section herself. He did not praise her in a way that made her feel trained. He simply said, "That will hold better." It was enough. Around 2, the roof spoke again. A low groan rolled above the kitchen, then a sharper crack from somewhere near the weak rafter. Ada's eyes opened. Atlas rose instantly. Cole was already moving. "Attic," he said. Mara grabbed the lantern. "I am coming!" This time he did not pause. The attic was cramped, cold, and dim, with stored sacks, old trunks, broken chair legs, and the smell of dust trapped from summers before grief. Snow pressed against the roof boards overhead. Cole moved toward the weak span and ran his hand along the temporary brace. It shifted. "Can we fix it?" Mara asked. "Improve it?" I am beginning to dislike that word. Reasonable? They cleared boxes away from the load path. Mara found a lodgepole they had stored near the attic hatch and dragged it over with a strength born from fear and irritation. Cole measured by hand because the folding ruler of the old story did not belong here. His tools were cord pencil and a field notebook whose pages had seen weather in several states. He marked the pole cut it with Elias's saw and set it under the strained rafter while Mara wedged the base against a block. The work was awkward, not cinematic. They slipped. They cursed mildly because Ada was below. Cole's bad hand trembled and Mara pretended not to notice until the tremor became too much. "Switch," she said. "I can hold it."
"You can hold your pride. Give me the weight."
He looked at her, and for a second she saw the old command instinct rise, then bow its head. He shifted. She took the brace. It was heavier than expected. Her arms shook. Cole set the wedge, hammered it home, and the rafters groan eased by a fraction. Beneath them, Ada called, "If you two are rebuilding the house, kindly include a closet." "Denied," Mara shouted back. "Budgetary reasons." Cole let out one breath that might have become laughter if the roof had not cracked again, shorter this time. He stood still, listening. "Not the brace," he said. "Outside load. South edge may be shedding uneven." "Can we clear it?" "Not from the roof in this wind." So we reduce inside stress, keep heat steady, and wait for the gust pattern to change." Waiting was sometimes the useful thing. Mara hated that lesson most. They returned below, faces dusty, hair full of cobwebs. Ada looked them over. "You both look married now." Mara blinked. Cole looked at the floor. "Mother, what marriage is mostly finding someone else dusty in the same disaster?" Mara should have objected. Instead, she laughed, then almost cried, then chose the laugh because it was less trouble. Cole turned away to feed the stove, but she saw his shoulders loosen. Late afternoon brought the slope behind the barn back into the story. Atlas heard it before anyone else. He had been resting near the storm door, chin on paws, when his head snapped up. Not toward the roof, toward the rear of the property. A low sound came from him, deep and controlled. Cole looked at the dog, then at Mara. "I need to check the barn side. You said 1 hour. It has been 4, I know. We go together, Mara. Do not spend my trust by sneaking into weather." The words landed hard. He accepted them. They tied off, layered up, and stepped into a world almost entirely white. The trip to the barn was worse than before. Snow had buried the lower rope in places. Atlas found it by scent and memory, pushing through chest-deep drifts with stubborn discipline. At the barn's rear, they saw the problem only when they were nearly upon it. Snow from the cut bank behind the property had slumped downward, not a dramatic mountain disaster, not the kind of thing stories should decorate with terror, but a heavy, dangerous shift of weight that had pushed against the rear fence and partly blocked the drainage ditch Cole had cleared. If more snow stacked there and thawed wrong later, water could run toward the barn foundation. If the drift pressed harder tonight, the rear boards might bow. "Can we move it?" Mara shouted over the wind. Cole shook his head. "Not all. We open a channel. Give Melt somewhere else to go. Take pressure off the fence." It was miserable work. They shoveled in turns, tied to the rope, with Atlas stationed near the barn door. Cole showed Mara where to cut the channel shallow, not deep, to avoid creating a wall that could collapse inward. He did not use frightening language. He used practical language. Snow has weight. Water needs a path. A fence cannot breathe if buried. Mara worked until her lungs burned. Cole's face went pale with fatigue, but he kept his movements measured. When Mara stumbled, he steadied her by the elbow and let go as soon as she had balance. That mattered too. They had almost finished when a gust ripped loose the upper edge of the wind panel near the barn path. It slammed against its tie, flapping hard. Atlas barked once. Cole turned. "Inside," he said. Mara looked at the panel. "It will tear free. Inside, now. We do not chase boards in a whiteout." The command was sharp, but not prideful. Mara heard the difference. She obeyed because the order served life, not his need to be obeyed. They reached the house, exhausted, wet to the knees, faces raw. Cole shut both doors of the storm entry carefully, one before the other, keeping the wind from charging straight into the kitchen. Ada's eyes filled when she saw them. "You are both fools," she said. "But you came back, so I will reduce the charge." Cole leaned one hand against the wall. Atlas shook snow everywhere again. No one scolded him. The evening deepened. The torn panel hammered in the storm but held by one tie. The roof groaned but did not fail. The stove drew. Ada's breathing remained easier. Mara and Cole sat on opposite sides of the table, too tired to maintain anger at full height. Between them lay the field notebook open to a rough plan of the farm with lines, arrows, and small notes. Mara reached for the pencil and marked the slope behind the barn. "In spring," she said, "we drain this properly." Cole looked at the mark, then at her. "Yes." "And raise the rear fence." "Yes." "And no one tells Orrin he was right about the crawl space until I am emotionally prepared." Cole's smile came slowly. "I can support that." Atlas placed his chin on the table edge, eyes moving from one human to the other. Ada, half asleep, murmured, "That dog is waiting for minutes from the meeting." Mara laughed softly. Then the radio crackled. Static filled the room. Then a voice broke through, faint and strained. "County advisory. All residents shelter in place. Winds increasing overnight. Medical calls delayed." The voice vanished. Ada's medicine bottle stood on the shelf, half full. Harriet was safe for now. Noah was safe for now. The house was holding for now. That phrase, "for now," sat beside every candle. Cole closed the notebook. "We rest in shifts." "You will actually rest?" Mara asked. "If ordered by the property owner." "Then rest." He looked at her. The room seemed to listen. "Yes, Mara." He lay on the cot near the stove, one arm over his eyes, Atlas beside him. Within minutes, the dog slept. Cole did not. Mara could tell by the tension in his jaw, by the way his hand found Atlas's fur. She sat with Ada's quilt across her knees and watched the stove flame reflect in the window. In the glass, she saw herself, tired and wind-burned, wearing a ring given by a man who had lied and then stayed to be known. She saw Cole behind her. Not a savior, not a villain, not a simple extra pair of hands. A man who had run from being trusted and landed in a house where trust had to be rebuilt, one practical choice at a time. Outside, the storm pressed harder. Inside, the house answered with wood rope, heat breath, and the stubborn refusal of people who were not ready to lose. Night in the blizzard did not feel like night. It felt like the world had been turned inside out and filled with moving snow. The Harrow house held a small circle of yellow light around the stove, and beyond that circle, every corner seemed to listen. Mara woke from a shallow doze to the sound of Atlas whining under his breath. Not a dog's ordinary dream sound, not hunger, not impatience. A narrow, controlled note that brought Cole upright before Mara had fully opened her eyes. The clock on the mantel said 2 in the morning. Ada slept with one hand curled near her throat, breathing steady enough for mercy. The roof gave a long, low creak, then settled. Outside, the torn wind panel hammered twice and stopped. That silence was worse. Cole swung his feet to the floor. Atlas stood facing the storm door. "What is it?" Mara whispered. Cole listened. The house made many noises now. Wind at the north wall stove, ticking, rope humming, loose snow slithering from the roof. Beneath those came another sound, dull and intermittent, from the direction of the barn. Not a crash, not yet. A pressure sound, a board giving small warnings before it gave a larger one. Cole reached for his parka. Mara was already tying her boots. He looked at her, saw the answer on her face, and did not waste breath objecting. We fix only what keeps animals safe and come back. Agreed. If I say back, we go back. If you say it because of danger, yes. If you say it because you have forgotten I own the barn, no. Even in the half-dark, she saw the corner of his mouth move. Agreed. They woke Ada enough to tell her they were crossing. Ada nodded, eyes cloudy with fever and sleep. Take the dog who knows more than both of you. Atlas accepted this description with professional calm. The storm entry did its job. Outer door opened, inner door stayed shut. Snow pushed against the threshold, but not into the kitchen. Cole had built that small room from mismatched boards,
A warped window frame and 2 hinges that squealed like elderly church ladies, and Mara loved it in a practical, irritated way. It had already kept warmth in the house through dozens of crossings. Outside, the cold struck with such force that thought shrank to rope breath, step rope breath step. Atlas led. The guideline had iced over, and Mara's gloves slid twice before she tightened her grip. Cole moved ahead, but not too far, his dark shape appearing and vanishing in snow. The barn emerged only when Atlas put his paws on the door. Inside, the cattle were restless, stamping, blowing steam, eyes wide in lantern light. The rear wall had bowed inward near the section where the cut bank drift pressed from outside. Not far. Enough. Cole moved the animals forward, one stall at a time, speaking low. Mara opened gates, tied ropes kept her body angled away from hooves, and worked as her father had taught her, with respect for fear and no patience for panic. Atlas held the center aisle, not herding wildly, but blocking the red heifer when she tried to turn back toward the weak wall. "Good boy," Mara said. The dog flicked one ear without taking his eyes off the cow. Cole assessed the wall. "We need to brace from inside and cut one pressure channel outside near the corner." "In this wind? Small channel, 5 minutes." "You have been wrong about minutes before. 10. That is not better." He looked at her, snow melting in his eyebrows, exhaustion making his face older. "If we leave it, the rear boards may give enough to hurt the animals. If we open a little path, we reduce the push. We do not dig deep. We do not stay long." The explanation was not dramatic. It did not make danger exciting. It laid the choice where it belonged, between bad and worse, with care as the only sensible tool. Mara nodded. "We brace first." They dragged 2 heavy boards from the loft, set them diagonally against the bowed section, and wedged the feet behind stones and packed dirt. The cattle shifted uneasily. Atlas stayed between them and the work, a living gate with amber eyes. Cole's injured hand shook when he lifted the second board. Mara took more of the weight without comment. He let her. That, too, was progress. Outside, they tied themselves to the rear post and moved along the wall by touch. The drift there rose almost to Mara's waist, packed hard by wind. Cole marked a shallow diagonal channel with the shovel handle, directing any later melt away from the barn corner. They dug in turns, 5 strokes each, no heroics. Snow blew back into their faces, Mara's lungs burned. Cole kept checking the slope above the wall, the rope, Atlas in the barn doorway. "Enough," he said at last. "It is barely anything. It is a path. Water only needs an invitation." They went back in. The wall still bowed, but no longer seemed to be holding its breath. The animals settled by degrees. The red heifer tried to chew the edge of Cole's parka and found Atlas staring at her with deep disapproval. "Even the cow knows your coat has seen better days," Mara said, voice rough from cold. "She has no respect for service history." "Neither do I if service history tastes like old canvas." Cole almost smiled, then looked toward the roof as a gust shook the barn. "We go." By the time they reached the house, Ada had managed to sit upright and heat water without setting anything on fire, which she considered proof of independence,
and Mara considered evidence that fear made mothers reckless. "You are supposed to rest," Mara said. "I rested until resting became dull. You have a fever. A modest one." Cole poured warm water for Atlas, then stood too long with the kettle in his hand. Mara took it from him. Their fingers touched, and this time neither of them moved away quickly. Not long enough. "Sit," she said. "Property owner's order. Wife's order."
The word slipped out. They both heard it. Ada looked at the stove with saintly innocence. Cole sat. Mara busied herself with cups because cups were less dangerous than faces. The storm raged on. At 4 in the morning, the radio crackled again. Oren's voice came through, weak but clear enough. Loomis Place holding Noah sleeping like a felled tree. Harriet bossing the stove. Blake Barn lost some siding. No injuries. Cole answered with their status, concise and calm. He did not take over the whole county. He did not become Mr. Mercer of Mercer Ridge Response. He simply shared what mattered. Harrow House holding barn. Braced, medicine adequate, rear drift channel cut. Radio check again at dawn if possible. When he signed off, Mara watched him.
"You did not tell Oren what to do."
He did not ask. Would you have if he had? Cole looked at the radio. I would have asked what he was seeing. Before telling? Before telling. She nodded. Trust did not bloom. It put out one cautious root. Near dawn, the wind shifted south for the first time in days. The change should have been relief. Instead, it sent smoke from the chimney into a brief hesitation and pushed loose snow against the storm entry from a new angle. Cole and Mara adjusted vents, cleared the outer door, and checked the chimney draw. The house was not warm. It was alive. Ada's fever broke shortly after sunrise. She woke, sweating, thirsty, and irritable, which Mara took as a medical improvement. "I dreamed your father was trying to build a snow fence out of hymnals," Ada murmured. "Did it work?" Cole asked before he remembered not to step into family dreams. Ada gave him a look. "No, but he was very proud." Mara laughed so suddenly she had to sit down. The sound broke something open in the room, not grief, not anger, but the hard crust over them. Cole laughed too quietly. Atlas, moved by communal feeling or the smell of broth, placed one paw on Cole's knee and stared at the pot. "He is asking for oatmeal," Ada said. "He is manipulating a patient," Cole replied. "That is a high-level skill," Mara said. "He learned from officers," Cole said. Then he froze, as if he had stepped too close to an old door. But the room did not punish him. Ada only nodded. "Then he has overcome much." The day brightened without clearing. Snow still flew, but the worst wind eased by afternoon. They could see the barn from the porch. The guide ropes hung iced and faithful. The wind fence beyond the yard had lost one upper panel but stood. The new angle kept the path partially open. The north wall inspection showed dry logs. The roof brace held. Every small success felt less like victory than reprieve. Cole slept for 2 hours at Mara's insistence. Truly slept this time, one hand buried in Atlas's rough face, unguarded in a way she had not seen. Without wakefulness, he looked younger, and more wounded not by visible harm, but by the burden of staying ready too long. Mara sat at the table with his field notebook open before her. He had left it there deliberately, or forgotten it. She was not sure which. The pages held sketches of the farm, wind arrows, supply lists, roof loads, and in the back, a few names written carefully. Not stories. Names. One was Daniel Price, another was Seema Rahimi, another only initials T.W. There was also a small line under them. Tell the truth before it becomes shelter. Mara closed the notebook. She did not feel she had spied. She felt she had touched a bruise through cloth. When Cole woke, she slid the notebook toward him. "You left this open." He looked at it, then at her. "I did. On purpose, I am trying to learn the difference between privacy and hiding."
The answer was not polished. It cost him something. Mara looked toward Ada, asleep again, then at Atlas, whose paws twitched in a dream. I read the names. Cole nodded. They deserve to be names, not shadows. Tell me only what can be told safely. He understood what she meant. No spectacle, no sharp details, no making sorrow earn its place by being described too closely. He told her about Daniel Price, a teammate who sang badly and wrote letters to his sister every Sunday. He told her about Seema Rahimi, a child whose family had trusted promises made by adults with maps, machines, and good intentions that arrived too late. He told her about T.W., a pilot who blamed himself for weather no aircraft could change. He spoke gently, broadly, as if each person were a candle and his job was not to burn them brighter for Mara, but to keep them from going out. Mara listened. Her anger did not vanish. It changed posture. It sat down. I am sorry, she said. Cole's eyes dropped. So am I. That does not fix us, no, but it tells me where the ache begins. He looked at her then, and in the quiet after the storm's worst rage, something passed between them that was not forgiveness yet, but might someday become its weather. Late afternoon brought a knock at the storm entry. Everyone startled except Atlas, who barked once, then wagged. Noah stood outside, red-faced, snow-caked, and absurdly proud, with Oren behind him on horseback. The boy had come to report Harriet safe in person because the radio had failed again, and because, as he said while Ada scolded him, Aunt Harriet told me not to, which meant she expected me to decide wisely. That is not what that means, Mara said. Noah looked to Cole. Cole shook his head. Absolutely not what that means. Oren pushed inside long enough to warm his hands and inspect the storm entry with reluctant interest. This two-door box saved you some heat? Some, Cole said. More than some, Mara corrected. Oren glanced at her. You build it, we did. The we came easily. Cole heard it. So did Ada. Noah looked between them and had the grace not to grin until he turned away. Oren left before dark, promising to check again when the road improved. Noah stayed the night because Harriet's place was safe, but the creek path was not. He slept on the floor near Atlas, who tolerated the arrangement until Noah rolled onto the edge of his quilt, then shoved him gently but firmly back into human territory. The storm finally weakened near midnight. Not ended, not forgiven, only tired. Mara stood at the window, watching snow drift under a moon hidden by cloud. Cole came to stand beside her, leaving space. When this clears, he said, Ephraim will come. Your uncle? Yes. To take you back. To ask me to return. Can he? Cole did not answer at once. Mara appreciated that more than reassurance. He can offer everything I left, and you, I do not know how to answer without making a promise too early. That hurt. It also respected her. She looked out at the white yard, the barn still standing, the wind fence scarred but upright, the guide ropes half buried, the world they had kept alive by inches. Then do not answer early. Cole turned his head toward her. Mara. When you know, tell the whole truth the first time. His face softened, and the tiredness in it seemed less lonely. I will. Atlas from the floor gave a deep sigh in his sleep. Ada murmured, Dog agrees. Noah snored. The stove clicked. The house stood. Mara touched the ring on her hand and did not take it off. The morning after the blizzard's hardest night did not bring peace. It brought visibility, which was not the same thing. The Harrow farm emerged from the storm in pieces, as if the world were being returned one object at a time, the porch rail first, buried to the middle, then the pump wearing a crown of ice, then the barn standing but scarred, then the wind fence beyond the yard bent in one section, stripped in another but still lifting its dark ribs through the snow. The sky remained low, a pale lid of cloud, but the wind had dropped enough that falling flakes drifted downward instead of flying sideways. Mara stood in the storm entry with a shawl over her coat, holding a cup of coffee she had forgotten to drink. Her body ached in places she had not known could have opinions. Ada slept behind her, fever-broken and face peaceful for the first time in days. Noah snored on the floor, with one arm flung over his eyes. Atlas lay beside the door, awake, alert, and displeased that no one had yet opened it for inspection. Cole stood at the window, field notebook in hand, not writing. "Say it," Mara said. He glanced over. "Say what?" "The list in your head is making noise." A corner of his mouth moved. Barn wall, roof load, chimney, north skirt, wind fence, slope channel, woodpile, pump, county radio, Loomis Place, Blake Ranch, Store Road. "That is all?" "I left out breakfast." "A reckless omission." Ada, without opening her eyes, murmured, "Start with breakfast. Men make worse decisions hungry." Cole looked toward her and something gentle passed across his face. "Yes, ma'am." They ate oatmeal biscuits and the last of the venison gravy. Atlas received his portion from Ada, who called it a medical supplement. Cole did not argue either from wisdom or surrender. After breakfast, they made a plan at the table. Not Cole's plan, not Mara's alone. A farm plan spoken aloud, with Noah rubbing sleep from his eyes and trying to look as though he had been invited as a man rather than tolerated as a boy. They would inspect a house together, then the barn. Then Cole and Orrin, if radio contact returned, would check on the nearest homes. No one would travel alone. No one would chase loose boards in wind. No one would spend strength to prove courage when usefulness asked for less. Noah wrote that last line on the wrapping paper map because he liked it, and because, as he said, Aunt Harriet will believe it more if it looks official. "Your aunt believes official things less," Mara said. "She respects handwriting." "Then write clearly," Cole said. The first inspection gave them hope with work attached. The north wall logs were dry behind the skirt. The vents had frost around them, but no trapped damp. The chimney hood had held. The roof brace in the attic remained tight, though the south edge carried an uneven load of snow that would need clearing when safe. The storm entry had drifted at the outer door, but the inner door had kept the kitchen from losing its heat. The water buckets had not frozen solid. These were not miracles in the trumpet sense. They were quieter. Boards placed with thought. Holes left for breath. A chimney lifted 3 feet. A dog who warned before people heard. A woman who learned to read the wall herself. When Mara opened the inspection board and smelled dry old pine instead of damp rot, she closed her eyes for half a second. "Good?" Cole asked. "Dry. That is good. I know. I just wanted to say it first." He nodded solemnly. "Dry by order of the property owner." She almost smiled. The barn was colder and more troublesome. The rear wall brace had held, but snow packed high against the outside. The shallow channel they cut had already begun to fill again, though not completely. One upper siding board had split. The cattle were unsettled but unharmed. The red heifer attempted to eat Noah's scarf, confirming that crisis had not improved her character. Atlas blocked her with one shoulder and a weary look. "She respects him more than me," Noah said. "She has known you longer," Mara said. "That is hurtful. It is agricultural truth." Cole inspected the rear wall, then stepped back. He did not say what he would do. He turned to Mara. "I think we leave the brace clear only the top pressure by hand from inside, and wait for thaw before real repair. Digging outside now risks wasting energy and making the drift unstable." "You think or you recommend?" she asked. He considered. "I recommend." "I agree." The words came without force. Agreement, Mara was learning, could be a structure too. They cleared what they could safely clear, laid extra straw for the cattle, and returned to the house as the radio crackled. Orrin's voice came through clearer than expected. Blake Ranch had lost more siding and one shed roof had folded under snow, but no one was hurt. Harriet was safe, though insulted that Noah had slept elsewhere without providing her a full, written explanation. The general store had heat, but low supplies. 2 elderly neighbors north of the creek had not been heard from since before the storm. Cole listened, jaw tight. This was the moment Mara had wondered about. Would he become the man Leander described the commander people called Mr. Mercer? The man whose voice could fill a room and leave no space for others? He reached for the radio. "Orrin, what can you see from your ridge?" he asked. "Not go here, not do this." "What can you see?" The old rancher's answer came slowly, pleased perhaps to be asked rather than ordered. He could see smoke from the Loomis chimney, faint smoke from the Pritchard place, no smoke from the old Miller cabin, though the angle was poor. The road was blocked by drifts near the cottonwoods. Creek ice looked covered but uncertain. "Who is closest to Miller?" Cole asked. "Me, by Ridge Trail," Orrin said. "But the Ridge Trail is a fool's errand today." "Agreed. Is there a lower fence line route?" "Longer, safer, maybe." "Do you have 2 riders?" "I have myself and a horse with more sense than both of us." Mara reached for the handset. Cole let her take it. "Orrin, this is Mara. Noah is here. If Harriet can spare him later, he can help relay by creek fence, but not ride to Miller. He knows the line to Loomis, not beyond." Noah looked ready to protest, then shut his mouth. Cole noticed and gave the boy one approving nod. Orrin answered, "Copy that, Mrs. Mercer." Mara froze at the name. Cole did too. Ada from the chair opened one eye. "Well, that arrived before the mail." Mara pressed the talk button because silence would make the moment larger. "Harrow is fine on the radio, Orrin." "Copy that, Mrs. Harrow." Orrin sounded as if he were smiling. "Or Mrs. Whoever keeps Cole from being foolish. That one may be too long for emergencies." They built the day's work around neighbors. Noah carried a written message to Harriet at noon, with Atlas and Cole accompanying him halfway, then returning before visibility worsened. Harriet sent back bread, dried apples, and a note demanding that Noah not be used as some sort of heroic snow ornament. Mara laughed until her eyes watered. Cole read the note twice and folded it carefully. "Your friend has a gift, for command, for artillery. Safe language, Mr. Mercer." He gave her a look. "For punctuation." In the afternoon, Orrin and Leander, who had weathered the storm at Blake Ranch after helping with the culvert, reached the Miller cabin by the lower fence route and found the old couple, cold, frightened, and out of stove wood, but alive. They did not describe the scene in dramatic terms over the radio. They did what people do when decency matters. Reported needs, condition, and next steps. Wood required, hot food required, medicine maybe, no travel after dark. Mara packed a basket. Cole prepared a sled route. Ada insisted on adding a jar of peaches saved from summer because people remember sweetness when the weather has been rude. Noah, sent from Harriet with permission, and a scarf tied correctly this time, helped lash the basket. "I can go," he said. Cole shook his head. "You can help load. Orrin and Leander know the route. Your job is to make sure Harriet and Ada have water before evening." "That sounds small." Mara turned to him. "Small is a word people use when they do not have to live without it." Noah looked at the water buckets, then at Ada, then away. "Yes, ma'am." He carried water, not with the glow of glory, with the red-faced inconvenience of growing up. Cole watched him and said nothing. The storm had left more than damage. It had rearranged the town's understanding of itself. All afternoon, radio voices moved between houses. When the signal allowed, short, plain, generous, need lamp oil, have flour, fence down, cattle contained, medicine low, road blocked, can wait, cannot wait. Cole guided when asked, but he did not seize the net. Mara saw the effort it took. Sometimes his hand tightened on the handset. Sometimes he closed his eyes before answering, as if forcing himself to ask one more question before offering one more solution. Atlas lay beside him during those moments, chin on his boot. Around dusk, the clouds lifted enough to show a strip of bruised purple sky over the ridge. The farm looked both damaged and blessed. The wind fence stood in rough outline, having gathered a huge drift on its outer side, while leaving the house wall clearer than any neighbor's. The woodpile was lower than Mara liked, but not desperate. The house smelled of broth, wet wool smoke, and survival. Ada sat at the table for supper, pale but upright. Noah ate 3 biscuits and tried to apologize for it. Harriet's biscuits, having been designed for endurance, accepted the challenge. Cole drank coffee while staring at the cup as if surprised to find himself among people after disaster, without anyone demanding he become more than a man. After supper, Mara stepped outside alone. The cold bit, but the wind had dropped to a whisper. Snow reflected the lantern glow from the window. She walked to the wind fence, following the path they had fought to keep open. The marker sticks stood nearly buried, each one proof of a guess made, corrected, tested. Cole came after a minute, not too close. "I can go back in," he said. "Stay." He did. They stood looking at the drift. "Leander said your uncle will come when the road's clear." "Yes." "And the company." "Yes." "What happens if you do not go back?" He put his hands in his pockets. "The company runs. Ephraim is better at offices than I am. My managers know their work. I have been gone before." "That is not the question." He nodded. "I lose the excuse that I am only here because I cannot leave." There it was, the truth she had been circling for days. Mara looked at the house. Ada's curtain moved. Atlas watched from the porch, having apparently decided privacy was acceptable only at a visible distance. "I thought your needing us made me safe," she said. "That was my lie to myself." Cole turned toward her, but she kept looking at the house. "If you were poor, stranded, and grateful, you might stay. If you had nowhere better, I would not have to wonder why you came back each morning." Her throat tightened. She did not let it close. "Now you have somewhere better by every measure this world writes down." "Yes." "Honest, painful, necessary." "Then why are you still here tonight?" Cole looked at the wind fence, the barn, the house, the rope lines, the path carved by repeated crossing. "Because every morning here, the work in front of me has a face. Ada's breath. Your hands on a bucket, Noah trying to be brave without knowing what it costs, Atlas sleeping without listening for aircraft." He stopped, then began again more quietly. "Because I lied when I let you think I had nothing. But I did not lie when I wanted to stay." Mara closed her gloved hand around the top of a marker stick. Snow squeaked under her boot. "Wanting is not enough." "No. Truth, choice, time, those are the boards. Then I will bring those. You do not get to build this alone." "I know." She looked at him then. In the dim light, his face was tired, wind-burned, unguarded. Not noble in the easy sense. Human. That was harder to forgive and easier to trust. Mara pulled the marker stick from the drift and handed it to him. "Tomorrow we mark the south roof edge. My guess first." He took the stick. Their gloves touched. "Your guess first." From the porch, Atlas gave one satisfied bark, then turned and pushed the kitchen door open with his nose, letting warm light spill briefly across the snow. Ada's voice floated out, thin but firm. "Close that door, you expensive animal!" Cole laughed. Mara laughed too. And this time the sound did not feel like betrayal of her anger. It felt like the first board laid across a gap that would take many more. The days after the blizzard were harder than the storm in a way no one had warned Mara about. During the whiteout, the work had been immediate. Feed the stove, hold the rope, brace the roof, clear the vent, bring medicine, keep breathing. Afterward, choices multiplied. Snow had to be moved without wasting strength. Cattle needed water hauled through paths that kept filling. The barn wall had to be watched but not overworked. Neighbors required help, but every trip spent heat, time, and energy the Harrow place could not replace quickly. The county road remained blocked in 2 places. The store rationed lamp oil. The church roof lost shingles. The Miller cabin needed wood. Harriet's chimney drew poorly until Orrin adjusted the cap, then took credit for common sense while asking Cole 3 questions about wind pressure when he thought no one listened. Recovery, Mara discovered, had less thunder than crisis and more arithmetic. It asked not whether a person was brave, but whether she could do the next ordinary thing while tired of being ordinary. Cole seemed built for that kind of work, but now Mara understood the cost beneath the usefulness. Every request from the radio put a shadow behind his eyes. Every time someone asked, "What do you think, Mercer?" his hand found Atlas's ruff before he answered. Still, he did answer. Differently. He asked what they saw, what they had, who was closest, who was warm, who could wait. He let Orrin decide for his own ranch. He let Harriet refuse a route she did not like. He let Mara correct his estimate of how long Ada could sit up before needing rest. Trust moved through the valley like the radio signal, imperfect, breaking, returning. On the second clear day, Leander brought news from town. He arrived on horseback leading a pack animal loaded with mail, kerosene, and a face that said he carried more than supplies. Mara saw him from the porch and felt the house tighten around her. Cole was repairing the storm entry latch. He looked up once, then returned to the screw, because some men needed a piece of metal under their hands when the past rode in. Atlas stood and moved to the yard tail level. Leander dismounted carefully. "Road to town is passable by horse, not by truck. Telegraph line is partial. I got word through to Denver 2 days ago." Cole's hand stopped on the screwdriver. "Ephraim, on his way as soon as the rail and roads allow. He says if you are alive and stubborn, he is only surprised by one of those things." Ada, seated near the window, murmured, "I like him already." Mara did not. Not yet. She did not dislike him either. Ephraim Mercer was still only a name attached to a life that could take Cole away, which made him easy to resent from a distance. Leander warmed himself in the kitchen and gave them updates. Mercer Ridge Response had continued operating. County contracts had not collapsed. Ephraim had signed temporary authority. Several staff had been worried. Some had been angry. A few had apparently suggested Cole was on a spiritual retreat, which Leander found funny until no one laughed. "They need to know what you intend," he told Cole. "I know." "Do you?" Cole looked at him. "No, but I know they need it." Leander accepted that. Mara appreciated the difference. That afternoon, while Cole and Leander inspected the county truck radio, Noah came from Harriet's place with a repaired scarf and a new seriousness that did not quite fit his face yet. He found Mara splitting kindling and took the axe before she asked, then hesitated. "May I?" The question made her smile. He had been around Cole too much. "You may, if your hands know where your feet are." He set a piece of pine and split it badly, then better, then well enough. "And Harriet says I should stop talking about leaving until I understand staying. Your aunt is unbearable when wise. She says the same about you." "Good." Noah worked in silence for a while. Then he said, "Mr. Mercer said war stories told wrong can shrink people." Mara set kindling in the basket. "That sounds like him. I thought joining up would make me matter." "It might. It might also show you that you mattered before." He looked toward the barn where Atlas was nosing through a snowbank with investigative zeal. "I did not do anything big in the storm." "You carried medicine. Atlas showed me the path. You still had to walk it." "I was scared." "That does not remove the deed." Noah swallowed, nodded, and split another piece. The axe struck clean. Across the yard, Cole watched without interfering. Mara saw pride in his face, not ownership. That distinction mattered. By evening, the valley had organized itself around practical mercy. Orrin sent 2 rails to the Miller cabin. Harriet sent bread to Ada and scolded Noah by note because weather had not provided enough opportunity in person. Reverend Wells, who had earlier worried over Mara's reputation, now arrived pulling a sled of blankets for neighbors and looking humbled by the fact that scandal had become survival. He stood in the Harrow kitchen with snow melting from his hat. "I owe you an apology," he said to Mara. She raised her eyebrows. "Only one," Ada coughed into her hand to hide a smile. Reverend Wells accepted the blow. "At least one spoken clearly. I mistook the shape of concern. I worried how things looked before I understood what was being carried here." Mara looked toward Cole, who stood near the door with Atlas beside him. "Things looked strange because some of them were." "Even so," the Reverend turned to Cole. "And you, Mr. Mercer. I do not know your story, but I have seen what your work spared this house. Thank you." Cole looked uncomfortable enough to prove Leander right about praise. "It was not just my work. Then I thank the household." Reverend Wells smiled at Atlas. "Including the officer at the rug." Atlas sneezed. "He accepts," Ada said. The apology did not heal everything, but it altered the air. Mara had spent weeks bracing against community talk. Now the same community moved through radio static and snowpaths with baskets rails, medicine blankets, and questions about vents. People were not one thing. Neither was Cole. Neither was she. That night, Mara and Cole walked to the barn together under a sky finally clear enough to show stars. The cold had sharpened after sunset. Each star looked nailed into black glass. They checked the cattle, the rear wall brace, the drainage channel. The red heifer attempted no crimes. Atlas seemed almost disappointed. On the way back, Mara stopped near the buried truck, in the ditch now little more than a white mound with one mirror showing. "You could have used the radio sooner if you had told me what was in the truck." Cole looked at the mound. "Yes. Why didn't you?" "Because using it meant being found."
And being found meant becoming Mr. Mercer again. Yes. And marrying me while hiding from that was easier. The question was sharp, but not cruel. Cole's breath smoked in the starlight. Not easier. Cowardly in a quieter way. Mara studied him. Few men offered that word for themselves without decorating it afterward. He did not. "What are you afraid Ephraim will ask?" "To come back. That is all, to be needed by many people again." "You are needed here, I know. Does that frighten you?" He looked at the house. Warm light glowed in the kitchen window. Ada's silhouette moved behind the curtain. Noah was probably on Harriet's floor by now, being fed advice with supper. Atlas stood between Cole and Mara, watching both. "Less than it did," Cole said. "Because here I am learning I can be needed without pretending certainty." Mara let the words settle. "You never pretended certainty with weather." "Weather corrects arrogance quickly." "So do Harrow women." His smile came soft. "I have noticed." She looked away before warmth rose too plainly in her face. "When Ephraim comes, I will not beg you to stay." "I would not ask that." "I will not compete with money houses contracts or 40 people calling you Mr. Mercer." "Mara." "No. Hear me. If you stay because you pity us, I do not want it. If you stay because you are hiding, I do not want it. If you stay because the storm made this house feel holy for a week and you mistake relief for love, I do not want that either." Cole stood very still. The honesty hurt as it came out, but it came clean. "If you stay, it must be because you choose this life when every other door is open." Cole nodded. "And if you ask me to remain your husband after that, it must be because you choose me knowing every door was open." She had not expected him to turn the truth so gently back toward her.
Her throat tightened. I know. Atlas leaned against her leg, then heavy and warm, as if reminding them that some choices had already been made by creatures wiser than either of them. Mara set a hand on his head. Your dog is interfering. He does that when humans circle obvious things. Do not agree with him too much. They returned to the house. The next day, work widened beyond the farm. Cole, Mara, Oren, Leander, and Noah formed small routes to help clear vents, check chimneys, move wood, and mark dangerous drifts around nearby homes. The telling remained safe and practical, as all real rescue should when retold with respect. They did not glorify risk. They shortened it. They carried supplies where needed, refused unnecessary trips, and turned back twice when conditions worsened. Cole taught neighbors to build small storm entries, raise chimney caps above turbulence, and leave breathing space behind insulation. Oren copied the porous wind fence, though he insisted he had been considering something similar for years. Harriet asked if the gaps were for humility, and Oren told her to go manage a biscuit. Noah began keeping a notebook of Ruth's supplies and which neighbors needed checking. He wrote in large, clear letters because Harriet had indeed respected handwriting. Mara saw the boy changing. He still wanted a larger life, but he no longer confused larger with farther away. On the fourth day after the blizzard, the sun broke through. Real sun yellow and almost startling. Snowfields glittered. Water dripped from eaves. The valley looked battered, bright, and full of work. Ephraim Mercer arrived that afternoon in a sleigh hired from town, wearing a dark overcoat too fine for the road and boots that had known polish more often than manure. He was in his 60s, straight-backed, silver-haired, and carrying worry like a briefcase no one could see. When he stepped into the Harrow yard, Cole was helping Mara mark a ventilation opening along the east wall. Atlas saw Ephraim first, barked once, then wagged cautiously. Ephraim stopped. His face changed at the sight of the dog, then of Cole. For a moment, the man from the company and the uncle were two different people trying to use the same mouth. "Cole," he said. Cole set down the pencil. "Ephraim." The older man crossed the yard and embraced him, hard. Cole stiffened, then returned it. Mara looked away because some reunions deserved not to be stared at. Ada watched from the doorway without shame. "He looks fed," she called. "So you may thank us before scolding him." Ephraim released Cole and looked toward the porch. A smile broke through his worry. "Ma'am, if you kept this man alive and fed, I owe you more than thanks." Ada nodded. "We will start with thanks and evaluate interest later." Cole laughed under his breath. Ephraim turned to Mara and removed his hat. His eyes went to the ring on her hand, then to Cole, then back. "Mrs. Mercer." Mara held his gaze. "Mara Harrow is fine." Ephraim, being intelligent, heard more than a preference. "Mara Harrow, then. I am grateful to meet you." Behind the courtesy stood the question that had ridden with him across snow and rail lines and worry. It entered the house with him. It sat at supper. It waited while Ada served stew, while Atlas inspected Ephraim's boots, while Noah arrived with Harriet's latest note and nearly swallowed his tongue at the sight of another Mercer. The past had come to the Harrow table. It wore a fine coat, said please, and had every right to ask for an answer. Ephraim Mercer did not ask his question at supper. That earned him more favor in Ada's eyes than his fine coat lost. He ate what was served, praised the biscuits without knowing they were Harriet's and therefore legally complicated, and listened while Noah explained how the storm entry worked with the intense authority of a young man who had not built it but had slept near it. Cole said little. Mara noticed that Ephraim noticed Cole saying little. The older man's worry had layers, business concern on top, family fear beneath. and under that the careful grief of someone who had watched a loved man disappear long before the body went missing. Atlas lay under the table with his head on Cole's boot and one paw touching Ephraim's, as if refusing to let the family separate too neatly. After supper, Ada declared that anyone intending to have a serious conversation should do so in the front room because the kitchen had worked hard enough. She went to her chair with knitting,
which fooled no one into thinking she would not listen. Noah was sent home to Harriet with Orrin, who had arrived to collect him, and stayed long enough to examine Ephraim with open curiosity. "You the uncle with the company?" Orrin asked. Ephraim buttoned his coat. "I am the uncle. The company is less portable." "Good. We already have one Mercer explaining holes in fences. Has he been right?" Orrin looked pained. "Weather has made certain concessions." Ephraim smiled. "That sounds familiar." When the door closed behind them, the house settled into quiet. Firelight moved over the log walls. The silver ring on Mara's hand caught a small glow. Cole stood near the mantel, not sitting, perhaps because sitting would make the conversation feel like surrender. Ephraim placed a leather folder on the table but did not open it. "Mercer Ridge is operating," he said. "No one starved because I was gone?" Cole asked. "No. They did worry Curse improvised." "And discover that your filing system is an act of aggression." Ada's needles clicked. "I knew I liked him." Ephraim's mouth twitched, then grew serious. "You still own the controlling share. Contracts await signature. 2 counties want winter audits before the next storm cycle. The K-9 program has 6 veterans waiting for placement. Denver wants you to speak at the spring training." Cole's face closed by degrees, not from disinterest but from pressure. Mara saw his hand move toward Atlas before he stopped it. Atlas, less concerned with dignity, shoved his head under Cole's palm anyway. Ephraim softened. "I am not here to drag you by the collar. You would lose a hand," Ada said. Everyone looked at her. She knitted. "Possibly to the dog." Atlas wagged once. Ephraim inclined his head. "Point taken." He opened the folder and removed papers, but instead of sliding them toward Cole, he laid them in the center of the table. "I need to know whether you are alive in more than the medical sense. I need to know what to tell people who depend on decisions attached to your name. And I need to know whether you intend to disappear again whenever trust begins to feel heavy." The words were firm, not cruel. Cole absorbed them. Mara felt the truth of them, and with it, a prick of fear. It was easy to make Cole's old life the villain when imagined from a distance. Harder when his company included veterans waiting for dogs, counties needing safer winter plans, staff who had carried his absence without understanding it. The world beyond the Harrow farm was not temptation only. It was responsibility. Cole looked at the papers, then at Mara. She held still. She would not rescue him from answering. She would not be the excuse he used either. "I cannot return as I was," he said. Ephraim nodded slowly. Good. He was becoming unpleasant. Cole blinked. Ada made a delighted sound. "Ephraim," Cole said, "what you were—" "Brilliant tired. Convinced every question had to pass through your hands. Men admired you and hid from you in equal measure." Cole looked down. "I thought if I controlled enough, fewer things would go wrong." "Things went wrong anyway." "Yes. And you blamed yourself for all of them." Cole's jaw tightened. "Not all. Enough." The room held quiet. Mara saw then that Ephraim had not come merely to reclaim a business asset. He had come to tell the truth from his side of the door. "Mercer Ridge needs leadership," Ephraim continued. "It does not need your old misery wearing a clean shirt. If you want out, say so, and we will restructure. If you want in, we find a way that does not crush you. If you want to sit in Montana and build fences with gaps in them, apparently there may be a market." Orrin would have hated how quickly Mara smiled. Cole did not smile.
His eyes had gone to the window where moonlight lay over snow. "Mara owns this farm," he said. "Yes," Mara said before Ephraim could respond. "And she speaks." Cole turned to her startled. She stood not angrily, but because sitting no longer fit. "Do not make me a condition in a business sentence. I will not be the reason you abandon people. I will not be the reason you return to a life that breaks you. I will not be the reason you stay if staying is only another hiding place." Ephraim watched her with interest. Ada's needles stopped. Cole looked at Mara as if every word mattered and hurt. "Good. Let them matter. This farm is Harrow land. My father's debt is mine to face, though if my husband has money and wishes to help his household, we will discuss it as husband and wife, not as rescue." Cole's mouth opened, then closed, wisely. "I married you for hands," Mara said. "That was true. It was also not the whole truth by the end of the storm. I do not know yet how to love a man who lied to me. But I know I do not want a smaller truth because the whole one is inconvenient." The fire clicked. Atlas leaned against Cole's leg. Ephraim looked away first, perhaps to give his nephew privacy inside being seen. Cole's voice came quiet. "I want to stay." Mara's heart moved before she allowed it. "Why?" "Because I choose you. Not because I am stranded, not because I am ashamed of being needed elsewhere. Because when every other door is open, this is the one I want to walk through in the morning." He looked toward Ada. "If you allow me." Ada lifted both hands. "I am old, not the county clerk." Cole looked back at Mara. "I also want Mercer Ridge to continue, but not with me at the center of every answer. I want to turn part of it toward training that happens here. Winter readiness, canine search support, veterans learning how to serve without chasing the worst day of their lives. Small classes, practical work. Montana winters are honest teachers." Ephraim's face changed, slowly, thought taking hold. "A Western training site. Maybe, seasonal, with local hires. With Mara's permission for anything touching this land." "And the farm?" Mara asked. Cole met her eyes. "The farm remains yours. Harrow land. If we repair it, we decide together. If debts are paid, it is because our household pays them, not because I buy forgiveness." The words struck exactly where fear had lived. Mara looked at the ring. "You have been practicing." Every sentence. "Good." Ephraim leaned back. "This is more coherent than I expected." "Do not sound too relieved," Cole said. "I am profoundly relieved and attempting dignity." Ada nodded. "A common male affliction." The meeting stretched late. Papers were read, not signed, in haste. Mara asked questions about debt ownership, liability, training dogs, near cattle, whether veterans would live on the property, who would maintain fencing, how many people, small class meant, when men with companies used small as a trick word. Ephraim answered with increasing respect. Cole answered when the question belonged to him and stayed quiet when Mara was doing just fine. That silence, chosen rightly, did more for her than any speech. By midnight, no final contract existed, but a path did. Cole would remain at the farm through winter and spring. Ephraim would manage the main company office. They would explore a Montana training program after repairs with Mara's approval and clear boundaries. Cole would write to his staff himself, not vanish behind Ephraim. He would tell the truth. Not every classified detail, not every wound, but enough that absence no longer wore the costume of mystery. After Ephraim retired to the front room cot, and Cole insisted on the barn until Mara said otherwise, Mara stood on the porch alone. The air had softened. Somewhere snowmelt dripped from the eaves. The world smelled faintly of pine smoke and thaw. Cole came out carrying his coat. "I can sleep in the barn," he said. "I know. I should. Should is a crowded word." He waited. She looked toward the barn, then the front room, where Ephraim now occupied the cot. Then the kitchen, where Ada had finally stopped pretending not to listen. "There is a chair by the stove," Mara said. "Not the cot, not my room, a chair." Cole's eyes softened, but he did not mistake the gift for more than it was. "Thank you. Do not make it solemn. It is bad for the furniture." "I will sit lightly." Atlas pushed past both of them into the kitchen, having decided the arrangement acceptable. Over the next weeks, winter loosened by inches. The county road opened, supplies returned. Men came from town to haul Cole's truck from the ditch, and when one recognized him from a newspaper clipping, Cole did not deny it. He said, "Yes, I am Cole Mercer," then introduced Mara before the man could turn him into a legend. That pleased her more than she admitted. Repairs began where urgency allowed. The barn rear wall was secured. The wind fence was rebuilt stronger, but still porous. Aaron built his own and pretended not to copy the angle. Harriet organized a neighbor work day with enough authority to frighten weather itself. Reverend Wells preached on humility without naming anyone, which everyone understood meant several people and possibly himself. Noah started spending 2 afternoons a week with Cole and Atlas, learning rope work, radio procedure, dog handling basics, and the sacred art of checking on elderly neighbors without making them feel like burdens. He no longer spoke daily of leaving. When he did speak of service, it sounded less like escape and more like a future he intended to earn carefully. Ada grew stronger as March approached. She walked to the porch on clear days and watched Atlas patrol the yard. Sometimes she spoke to Cole while Mara worked nearby. Not secret conversations, but older ones about mercy, grief, and the stubbornness of daughters. Cole listened. He had become good at that when he stopped preparing answers. Mara and Cole did not fall in love like a door blown open. They came to it as they had come through the storm by rope line and repeated crossing. One evening he repaired a loose shelf in the pantry and asked where she wanted every peg. Another morning she handed him coffee before he forgot to drink it. He told her about his mother whose ring she wore, a woman who had kept a garden near Norfolk and believed dogs understood scripture better than most deacons. Mara told him about Elias teaching her to whistle cattle home and crying secretly when she outshot him at fence post targets with a slingshot as a girl. Though she kept that story mild because triumph over fathers should be handled gently after they are gone. Cole moved from chair to cot after Ada declared the chair bad for his spine. He moved from cot to a room at the far end of the hall after Mara decided the house was large enough for honest people learning patience. The closed door between them became less a wall than a promise not to hurry. In late March, when the snowpack began to shrink and the first dark mud showed along the path to the barn, Ephraim returned with revised papers. This time he brought no urgency. Only documents, seed catalogs for Ada, and a ridiculous toy for Atlas that claimed to be indestructible. Atlas destroyed it in 6 minutes and looked refreshed. The training program would begin small in summer. 4 veterans, 2 dogs, local lodging, no spectacle, no dramatic advertising, no selling pain as inspiration. Practical classes, winter travel safety, search support basics, farm repairs in exchange for room use. Mara read every line. She changed 3. Ephraim accepted all 3. Cole signed only after she nodded. When the pen touched paper, Mara felt fear rise and pass. The open doors remained open. Cole had chosen one. That night, with spring wind moving through the still bare cottonwoods, he asked if she wanted to return to the church when the roads dried. "For what?" she asked, though she knew. He stood by the table, nervous in a way she had never seen him before danger. "Our first vows were lawful. I do not want to erase them, but you made them without the whole truth. If you want, I would like to say them again as the whole man, or as close as I can manage." Mara looked at Ada, who suddenly found the seed catalog fascinating. Atlas lay under the table, chin on paws, watching with grave interest. Mara touched the ring. "No flowers," she said. Cole's breath left him. "No flowers. Harriet will insist on food." She frightens me more than Oren. Wise. And your name? He asked carefully. At church, anywhere. Mara looked toward the dark window where the house reflected back stove-table mother-dog man herself. Mara Harrow Mercer, when I choose. Mara Harrow, when I choose. Wife is not a snowdrift, it does not bury the fence posts. Cole smiled then, slow and bright and unguarded. Yes, Mara. From the chair, Ada said, Put that in the vows. It is better than most of what Reverend Wells says. And for the first time in many months, the laughter in the Harrow house rose without looking over its shoulder. Spring did not rush into the Gallatin Valley. It arrived like an old woman suspicious of hospitality, one careful step at a time, lifting snow from the fence lines, softening the ruts, loosening the creek under its white lid, and leaving behind mud so deep even Atlas regarded it with moral concern. By early April, the Harrow farm looked less like a place under siege and more like a place waking sore from a long sleep. Broken branches lay along the cottonwoods. The barn wore new siding in 3 colors because donated boards rarely matched. The wind fence stood northwest of the house in its revised form, stronger at the posts, open at the top, ugly enough to be trusted. The storm entry remained by the kitchen door, no longer temporary, because Ada had said anything that saved that much heat had earned citizenship. The north wall skirt had been rebuilt with better boards, clean vents, and inspection panels Mara could open herself. She did every few days because knowledge once learned becomes a habit with its own appetite. Cole never stopped her to do it for her. Sometimes he stood nearby and drank coffee. Sometimes he asked what she found. Sometimes she answered dry by order of the property owner, and he smiled as if the phrase had become a family hymn. The debt in Elias Harrow's ledger was paid in late April, but not in the way Mara had feared. There was no grand announcement, no envelope placed on the table like a rescue, no rich man's gesture meant to turn gratitude into obedience. There was a conversation that lasted 2 evenings and half a morning, with Ada listening, Ephraim writing figures, Cole looking more nervous than he had on any roof, and Mara asking every question twice if the first answer smelled even faintly of gallantry. In the end, part of Cole's personal income went toward the household, because he was legally and by choice part of the household. The ledger entry was marked paid. The farm deed remained Harrow land. Mara placed the ledger back on Elias's shelf and cried only after everyone had gone outside, which did not fool Ada, who sent Atlas in with a folded handkerchief tied loosely to his collar. The dog delivered it with such solemnity that Mara laughed while crying a combination she had once considered undignified and now regarded as efficient. Cole found her later in the kitchen. He did not ask if she was all right. He had learned the limits of that question. He set a cup of coffee near her elbow and sat across the table. Your father built more than debt, he said. Mara looked at the ledger. He also built several crooked gates. Important family tradition. You are not allowed to continue it. Noted. She wiped her face with the handkerchief. I thought paying it would feel like winning, and it feels like setting down a bucket I forgot I was carrying. Cole nodded. That may be better. Outside, Atlas barked at the red heifer for placing her head through a repaired rail and testing the concept of freedom. Mara rose. Some buckets climb back in your arms. The church service took place 2 weeks later, after the road dried enough for wagons and motor trucks to pass without requiring a committee. Reverend Wells opened the doors early, because Harriet Loomis had opinions about ventilation seating and the moral failure of cold coffee. There were still no flowers at Mara's request, though Ada tucked one sprig of early lilac into her own coat and claimed it was not decoration, but medicine for the eyes. Mara wore the same brown dress, cleaned and altered at the waist because winter labor had changed her shape. Over it she wore a blue shawl Cole had bought in town, and then apologized for buying without asking. She had accepted it because she liked the color, and because not every gift was a trap if both people were free to say no. Cole wore a dark suit Ephraim had brought, slightly too formal for a man who had spent the morning helping Orrin fix a gate hinge. His hair was trimmed. His face was clean-shaven except for the shadow that arrived whenever he looked nervous. Atlas wore a brushed leather collar with no medals, no public proof, only a small brass tag engraved with his name and the Harrow farm telephone number, recently installed at Ephraim's insistence and Ada's delight. "In case he gets lost," Ada said. "Atlas does not get lost," Cole replied. "Then in case the rest of us do." Noah sat with Harriet near the front, trying not to look proud of the new notebook in his coat pocket. He had filled pages with supply lists, weather signs, neighbor routes, and drawings of knots that looked like confused pretzels but were improving. Orrin Blake stood near the aisle, hat in hand, pretending not to care about the ceremony while having arrived 40 minutes early. Leander Crow came too, carrying letters from Mercer Ridge staff. Ephraim sat behind Ada, silver hair, combed eyes bright. The church smelled of wood polish, damp wool, and the faint sweetness of Ada's illegal lilac. Reverend Wells did not make the ceremony long. Wisdom, like warmth, had been rationed enough that winter. "These vows were spoken once in necessity," he said. "Today they are spoken in knowledge. Both are serious. The second is a mercy." Mara looked at Cole. "The whole man," he had said, or as close as he could manage. She saw him now in layers, the stranger beside the road, the handler who asked water for his dog first, the liar by omission, the man in the barn telling hard truths without making them perform, the worker who left holes so walls could breathe, the husband who asked before moving aboard, the leader learning to ask what others saw. Not perfect, thank heaven. Perfection was too brittle for Montana. Cole looked back at her with the same steadiness, but no longer the guarded kind. When he spoke his vows, he did not promise never to fail. He promised to tell the truth before silence built walls. He promised to ask to listen, to stay by choice, and to leave room for Mara's strength rather than standing in front of it. Mara's voice trembled once, as it had the first time, but now she did not resent it. She promised not to mistake needing help for weakness, not to use anger as shelter after danger had passed, and not to let fear decide what love was allowed to become. She promised to keep Harrow roots in Harrow soil and make room for Mercer branches if they grew honest. Ada sniffed loudly. Harriet handed her a handkerchief with the air of a woman prepared for weather indoors. When Reverend Wells asked if anyone present had cause to object, Atlas, lying under the front pew, sighed so deeply that the entire church heard it. The timing was wicked. Noah coughed into his fist. Orrin stared at the ceiling. Ada laughed first, which gave everyone permission. Cole closed his eyes, smiling. Mara looked down at the dog. "Your objection is noted and overruled," she said. Atlas wagged. The church laughed harder, and the laughter rose into the rafters where winter's grief had no easy place to sit. After the ceremony, Harriet did indeed insist on food. Tables were set in the church hall with stew-bread, beans, biscuits, pies, and coffee that only one person described as strong enough to repair roads. The Miller couple came wrapped in shawls and thanked people without turning their fear into a story for entertainment. Orrin brought a sketch of his own new wind fence and pretended he wanted Cole's opinion only to prove a point. Cole asked what he had observed in the last storm. Orrin answered for 20 minutes. Ephraim spoke with Reverend Wells about using the church hall for 2 summer training evenings on storm preparedness. Harriet volunteered the hall before the Reverend finished agreeing. Noah showed Ada his notebook, and she corrected his spelling of ventilation with great seriousness. Leander gave Cole the letters from Mercer Ridge. Cole read them outside under the lilac bush while Mara stood beside him. The letters were not all gentle. Some staff were relieved, some were angry, some were simply glad he was alive. One handler wrote that if the Montana program meant fewer men pretending they were fine until a storm proved otherwise, Then he would drive west himself and bring 2 dogs. Cole folded the letters carefully. "I have apologies to write." "Yes," Mara said. "And invitations. Those too. And boundaries." He looked at her. "Those especially." Summer came with mud repairs and more planning than romance novels admit. The first Mercer Ridge, Montana class began in July, with 4 veterans, 2 young dogs, Atlas as senior critic, Noah as local assistant, Oren as unofficial skeptic, and Mara as the person everyone learned to ask before using a Gatefield barn tool or bucket. The program did not advertise trauma in large letters.
It did not turn pain into a banner. It taught practical things: how to build a storm kit, how to read wind around a structure, how to train a dog to search safely, how to check on neighbors without pride, how to tell the truth when help was needed. Some evenings after class, the men sat on the porch with coffee while Ada spoke to them as if they were nephews who had arrived underweight in common sense. Atlas moved from one pair of boots to another, choosing who needed his head on their knee. Cole led differently now. He still knew what he knew. He still moved quickly when weather changed. But he asked questions. He let others answer. He corrected without crushing. When he felt the old pressure rise, Mara could see it, and sometimes she would hand him a marker stick or a cup of coffee or simply say, "What are you seeing?" That brought him back better than any command. In August, Noah decided not to enlist that year. He did not make a speech. He told Harriet he wanted to help expand the local route maps, learn radio repair, and maybe train as an emergency medical technician in town. Harriet cried in the pantry and came out blaming onions, though no onions were present. Cole told Noah that staying for the right reason could be harder than leaving for the wrong one. Noah wrote that down, then crossed it out because it sounded too much like a sermon. Ada approved the edit. By the next winter wind, fences with gaps stood across several properties outside Bozeman. Storm entries appeared on farmhouses that had mocked them in January. Chimney caps rose higher. Crawl spaces gained vents. People still made mistakes because people are faithful to the habit, but they made fewer of the old ones. No one called it the Mercer system, partly because Cole disliked it, and partly because Oren insisted the idea had been obvious. Mara called it listening to snow. That name stayed in the Harrow house. On the anniversary of the blizzard, snow fell again, thick and quiet. Not as fierce, but enough to cover the yard by supper. Mara stood at the kitchen window with a cup of coffee, watching flakes pass through the lantern light. Cole came up beside her, close now, without asking, because years are made of permissions given and honored until they become peace. Atlas, older and grayer around the muzzle, lay near the stove, while a young shepherd from the training class slept beside him, learning by nearness. Ada dozed in her chair, lilac sprig long gone, knitting, resting in her lap. The house was warmer than it had been that first winter, better sealed, better vented. Still imperfect. Still alive. Mara opened the inspection panel near the north wall and smelled dry pine. She closed it with satisfaction. "Dry," Cole said. "By order of the property owner," she answered. He smiled and touched the ring on her hand, the one his mother had worn, the one Mara had chosen twice. Outside, snow gathered against the wind fence and sifted through the gaps, slowed rather than stopped. Mara understood that better now. Love could not be made into a solid wall. Neither could faith. Neither could trust. Build them too tight and they trapped damp, fear, silence. Leave room for breath and a house might hold through weather no one would choose. Cole looked toward the barn, then back at her. "Want to check the path before bed?" "In this snow?" "It is our path." She wrapped her shawl around her shoulders. "Then get Atlas, he outranks us both." The old dog rose with a sigh so theatrical that Ada opened one eye. "Close the door behind you," she murmured. "Were you raised in a barn?"
Mara looked at Cole. Cole looked at the barn. Atlas pushed the door open with his nose. For a moment, warm light spilled over the porch and onto the falling snow the same way it had months before, only now nothing between them was hidden in the dark. Mara stepped out beside her husband, her hand in his, the dog leading them down the path they had kept open together. The snow fell thick, but the house stood behind them breathing. Sometimes God sends help in a form we do not understand at first. It may look like an extra pair of hands, a hard conversation, a neighbor with soup, or a faithful dog standing in the snow. Until we follow. Mara learned that needing help did not make her weak. Cole learned that guilt was not the same as responsibility, and silence was not the same as strength. Their home survived because they left room for truth to breathe. If this story touched your heart, comment Amen, and remember someone near you may be carrying a winter no one can see. Share this with a friend who needs hope today. Subscribe for more heartfelt stories, and may God bless your home with courage, forgiveness, and the kind of love that stays by choice.